Go ahead, Trev. Kick us off.
You said you were getting my bad.
No, I'm going to introduce Bill, but you can. Hey, here we go. We're going to rocking and rolling. Here we are on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. We've got our Notre Dame Midweek Rundown today. Going to be a fun show. We've got a lot planned for you guys today. Obviously, as the title shows, we're going to talk about Notre Dame winning a national championship in 2026 and why it's going to happen. That's part one. And then the part two is going to be, if it doesn't happen, what are they going to be there? What could be the potential reasons why it doesn't happen? And then part three, we'll talk, or part three of what we talked about today was a quick Wisconsin preview. It's now going to be part of our weekly midweek rundown as opposed to like full shows. We will have a mailbag today that's going to be dependent upon time, but we wanted to have a special guest on today to kind of preview some things and talk a little bit of Notre Dame from an outside point of view. And of course, that is our friend Bill Bender. Ohio Bill. What was it? What'd they call you, Bill? Ohio Bill?
Big Ten Bill is
the
popular name on the podcast with Bill Trocchi and I. And we had Big Ten Scott Docterman today from the Athletic to talk 2014 playoff. And for your listeners, encourage you to go listen to that.
That's on the CFB Nation channel, by the way, our CFB Nation channel.
That was fun. So happy to be on with you guys. It's been a minute, Trev. Good to see you. And we can go wherever you guys want.
Yeah, so Bill, we're going to have you on. Number one, you guys released a college football preview magazine today. Sporting News did. Bill obviously is a lead college football writer for Sporting News, so you have that out. Trev and I have already bought ours. I bought one for me, had one shipped to Trev, and so we obviously worked through that. But we wanted to have you on, Bill. Obviously, the Notre Dame guys, we're going to talk about Notre Dame all summer, but we wanted to kind of get some of your thoughts on Notre Dame. We wanted to get some of your thoughts on the college football playoff, not so much from the 2014, but first and foremost, your thoughts on, your predictions and who you think the top contenders are for a title, where Notre Dame fits in there. And then, of course, you and I will share some of our thoughts on the 2014 playoff, because I think we're both not just against it, but I think against it with vigor, I would say is a nice way of putting it. So we'll talk about that. And then you and I are going to get back together here soon, either on our show or over on the CFB Nation show. And we're going to talk about some of these hearings today, because I thought some things were really, really good. And I saw some things were just like, I just wanted to scream at my television. So we're going to talk about that. But Trev, we're going to kick things off. Obviously, when you and I are going to dive into later about, why Notre Dame is going to win a championship. So we'll kick it to you, Bill, and say, what are your thoughts on this Notre Dame football team in 2026? What do you like about it? What do you think this team's ceiling is? What are some things that maybe you look back and say, hey, if they maybe don't live up to expectations, this could be the reason why. So let's just dive into it, man. Let's get your thoughts on the Irish here in 2026.
Well, as you pointed out with the preview, right, that this is a team that is very high expectations, and we have them in our playoff bracket. I put them in the national championship game with the thought that this team easily could win the national championship. So excited to see that. There's obviously some hurdles to that with we picked Indiana. Now, one of the things, and I was running this down with you, if you look at our preseason top 25, the top 10s right here on the magazine, which I know we're going to talk about right there. Big yellow cover for those that see it on the newsstands. Indiana's number one, but the internal debate we had right away is like, okay, so do we just make the bracket Indiana and Ohio State in the championship game, which is, as you know, the bracket doesn't typically go like that. And I wanted to pick Notre Dame to win the national title. I'll tell you part of the reason why is I think if I was picking the two teams based on big board talent, NFL draft pick elite talent, the two schools that had the most elite talent on our top 50, which are the players that can directly impact a game, are Notre Dame and Texas. So if Notre Dame and Texas played in the national championship game, I wouldn't be surprised at all. So they definitely have the roster. They have the quarterback. I would kick it to you guys. I would say CJ Carr is probably the most hyped quarterback I can remember from Notre Dame. Clausen, maybe. I mean, even Brady Quinn, it could go back that far. And maybe even more so because he's actually being billed as a Heisman front runner and NFL draft pick first round, depending on if he goes in the draft or not.
Bill, the article you're referring to is the feature you guys did where I think it was the top 50 draft, draft prospects in the 27 draft coming back to college football. At least that's the one that I saw. And I think Notre Dame was tied for first with Texas, I believe, for 5. And, it's funny, everybody's got their list of this Notre Dame player is good. And I've seen, I think, 8 different Notre Dame players projected into somebody's first round. But like one of those I don't see is Drake Bowen, who you guys had as the number 27 overall top draft pick. And so when you look at this Notre Dame team, I think that's what's a little bit different about this Notre Dame team than past years, Bill, is that you look at this team and it's not just, they've got 5 draft picks, but it's like 3 offensive linemen, a tight end, and a middle linebacker. It's they've got linebackers. They've got the number 1 corner in the country. They got a potential top 10 NFL draft pick at quarterback. There's some that have, Jordan Faison is one of the top 10 receivers. I think that's a difference between this team is because Ohio State in the past, Alabama in the past, Georgia, they're going to have NFL players at those positions Notre Dame has always had as well. That's why Notre Dame would lose those games because they could stalemate Notre Dame in the trenches or even win, but then they would dominate on the perimeter because Notre Dame didn't have athletes. And I think that's something that a lot of people around the country, I don't think have come to grips with yet. And you and I talked about this, Bill, when we watched the playoffs in 2024. I think people were shocked to watch, like, dude, Notre Dame's faster than Georgia. They're faster than Penn State. And that's a big that I don't think that's where I think a lot of people miss the boat that you and I have talked about and that you see.
Yeah, well, and I think, you mentioned Drake. I mean, that was 2 years ago. He was an impact player. And when I'm talking about guys that directly impact the result of a game, when you have the quarterback, number 1, CJ Carr, interchangeable. You and I were texting back and forth. Like, to me, the top 6 quarterbacks on our quarterback list are interchangeable. If you said CJ's number 1, okay. If you said Julian Sain, hey, he's the only returning Heisman finalist, he's number 1. Okay. All the way down to Dante Moore.
I think we had Dante 1.
Right. And that's fair. I mean, he can impact a game like that. Leonard Moore, you could argue, is the best defensive player in the country. Right. The way he impacts the game. I was there at the Nagurski Award ceremony last year. He was one of the 4 finalists. The other 3, Cassius Howell, Jacob Rodriguez, and Caleb Downs, are in the league. So, I mean, these are the best of the best. And I think that secondary, that front 7, they don't have a lot of weaknesses. The one that everybody's going to talk about, and it could be lazy analysis on some level, is Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price being gone. Anytime you lose 2 first-round picks at that position group, there's going to be a drop-off. We can't pretend like Jeremiah Love can be replaced, but they have names that can fill that void.
I don't even think that's lazy analysis, Bill, because it's not like they just lost a first-round draft pick. They lost a generational talent. It's like Ohio State will be great at receiver when Jeremiah Smith leaves, but let's not pretend that the next guy is as good as Jeremiah Smith, right? I mean, we can walk and chew gum at the same time and say, yeah, Notre Dame's loading up with talented players, but none of them are going to be Jeremiah Love. And none of them are going to be Jadarian Price. And I think where I wonder, and this is what I'll kick it to you, but to get your thoughts on this, it's not so much that losing those 2 players is you're not going to be still good there, but will you be elite there? And can your offense not be built around that group? Because it's not just that you lost those 2 players, but your entire offense was built around them. Well, now you got to build around somebody else. So it's not just assumed that you can plug in 2 guys and they're going to be able to carry the team. They're still very good players, but you're going to need other people to step up, which is, I mean, that happens to great teams every year. And the teams that win are the teams that can, what I call, replace and reload. And Notre Dame, that's a tough task to ask for that I don't think many people are having to understand. Like, it's not just your star, and then your backup was a first-round draft pick as well.
Well, yeah. And whenever you have a freshman, you can't, we attract ourselves to 4- and 5-star freshman running backs, but I mean, there's a curve there, like every other position. You mentioned Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. Some might argue, well, they got Chris Henry Jr. behind him, but Chris Henry Jr. has a year, which they've been able to pull off very well as they go from like Jackson Smith and Jigba. How's somebody going to be better than him? And it's Marvin. How's somebody better than him? And so on. And I think that's what you have to develop at positions like that. One position I wouldn't say corrected, but kind of clarified for me, when I was doing the breakdown, they have juggled the offensive line around a little bit, moved some guys around, but it should be up to standard. And I just look at the overall picture of the roster, and they're going to be super talented. Again, like I said about quarterbacks, you could interchange our top 6 in our rankings, and I'm looking up, sorry, I'm peeking right here. Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Notre Dame, Oregon. And I'm not going to put Miami in there yet because I think there's some question marks there. That top 6, if Trev or Brian, if you said, I got Oregon 1. All right. Yeah, I'm good with that. They have a ton coming back on defense. Georgia, we go back, Brian and I go back and forth on them every year, but all they do is win SEC titles right now.
That's all they know how to do. They can't
right.
win postseason games anymore, but they definitely know how to win the SEC.
And they'll be talented enough to make a run. And then
I think this Georgia team, by the way, is their most talented team since 2023.
That's dangerous proposition. And I'm higher on Indiana than some. Most preseason publications, you're going to see Indiana ranked 4, but I'm like, trust the process here. If Hoover cuts down the turnovers in the roster, they have enough guys back from last year that I think they're going to be pretty darn good. So it sets up for Notre Dame's in that conversation, and in that conversation for real. It's not a fake, let's just put Notre Dame in the top 10 to get headlines and then get mocked later. They are a valid, for real national championship type team. And like I said, if we picked Indiana, Notre Dame, which, it's in print, that's what we did. But if you put Texas or Ohio State or Oregon or even Georgia, I would say, I'm not going to dispute that.
I just want to point out something. Number 1, Bill, I have Indiana as my preseason number 1. I'm a believer in that you're the champ until somebody beats you, barring exceptions. Michigan 23 with all they lost on and off the field, coaching and players. That was an exception. LSU in 2019 to 2020 was an exception. They just lost so much. And I think that there's this constant waiting on Indiana to fall off and people not realizing, like, guys, this team is legitimately good and their roster remains the same. And the Josh Hoover stuff trips me out. Trev knows I've been high on Josh Hoover for a while. I had him on my top 10 quarterbacks list last year at TCU. But I just want to point out the year before, comparing stats of Fernando Mendoza and Josh Hoover to their years before going to Indiana, Josh Hoover had averaged 8.4 yards per attempt. Fernando Mendoza was 7.8. Josh Hoover had a 153.35 passer rating. Fernando Mendoza was a 144.59. Fernando Mendoza threw 6 picks in 2024 on 386 attempts, but only threw 16 touchdowns. And then Josh Hoover threw 13 picks, which he'll have to improve upon. But again, he's going to throw more picks than Fernando Mendoza because he's more of a gunslinger than Fernando Mendoza. You're just going to have to live with that. But he also threw 29 touchdowns compared to 16 for Fernando Mendoza. And then Fernando Mendoza goes from a 68% completion rate to 72. He goes from 7.8 yards per attempt to 9.3. He goes from a 144 passer rating to 182.91. Let's not pretend like Fernando Mendoza did not benefit from being surrounded by a lot better players, which will also be the true thing there. And that's going to be the question I have for CJ Carr when you talk about losing Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. The biggest change for Notre Dame this year, Bill, is this is now CJ Carr's team.
Mm-hmm.
And does CJ Carr have what it takes to say, hey, I'm not just a really talented cog. I'm now like the main driver of the success. I think that's going to tell us a lot about, or that's going to determine a lot how good Notre Dame can be this year is, can CJ be that guy?
Well,
I think that's true for, I think that's true for all these quarterbacks that are coming back. They all have to prove that they can be the guy and lead that team to the promised land because nobody's done it.
Well, Trev, where are you at on CJ Carr? Is he that guy that, like, did you have him in your top 5? I know Brian and I have said how we feel about him. Is he that guy that can be, Arch is going to get more hype and Dante Moore and Darian Mensah, who's a guy I like a lot, but is CJ Carr going to elevate to the rest of the nation where, he's a Heisman finalist or a leader, clubhouse leader now, but what do you think, Trev?
Yeah, I think he is. I had him in my top 5 quarterbacks as well, along with you guys. And I measure, and Brian knows this, I measure a lot of what a quarterback does based on what they do in the biggest moments. And I'm confident in saying that Notre Dame didn't lose to Miami or Texas A&M last year because of CJ Carr. Turnovers have to be limited. Knowing when to take what the defense gives you and eat the football a little bit also needs to be learned a little bit. But to the same light of Josh Hoover, CJ Carr also has a little bit of that gunslinger in him. So I'm not expecting to see him finish the season like what Aaron Rodgers did when he won the MVP, where he only had 2 interceptions all year. That's not the type of quarterback I think CJ Carr is going to be either. But watching his performance in his first career start ever as a redshirt freshman on the road down against Miami, at home under the lights the following game against an SEC, top 20 opponent in Texas A&M that came to town. I have all the confidence in the world that he can be that. There's no because of the namesake and he's a starting quarterback at a premier school, he's just going to be the Heisman favorite. We've seen CJ Carr be big on big stages. On the road for the first time against Arkansas, dude almost had 300 passing yards by halftime. So there's going to be a lot of the things that we've seen last year translate into this year. Now it's, to your guys' point, being able to elevate it to that next level because you don't have Love or Price.
Well, and I think real quick, I mentioned those past quarterbacks, and as you guys know, it goes all the way back to Bino Cook talking about, was it Paulus that he said was going to win 2 Heismans? Brian, help me on that one. Now, Notre Dame quarterbacks get hyped a lot. And then when you have a real-time one, I go back to Brady Quinn. By the way, he lives here in Ohio. I saw him at a lacrosse tournament a couple weeks ago. He must have a daughter or something. He walked by, and I was talking to one of the parents, and I didn't want to interrupt him. And I was like, I think that was, he goes, is that Brady Quinn? I was like, pretty sure. I was like, yeah, it's the guy that looks like 6'3", former first-round quarterback, looks like Brady Quinn. Yeah, that's probably him with Dublin stuff on because he played at Kaufman. But he was a real-time first-round pick, and he elevated the program and did those things. And that's why, Clausen, different story. Ian Book had a really good career, but was he a first-round guy? Obviously not. And CJ is the perfect storm of all of it because he's not only a potential first-round pick, he's a potential Heisman candidate. You guys don't need to be told that hasn't happened since '87 at Notre Dame. And, then you get into the national title part. If he does all 3 of those things, I mean, you're talking about like the Joe Montana, Joe Theismann type I mean, you're enshrined at that point almost. So I think that's a lot of pressure. I do like their schedule. Think it's set up for 10. There's no way they don't win 10 There's no way they don't win 10 games, in my opinion. I don't know how they could go 9-3 against this schedule.
Yeah, I want to point out something in the chat. Somebody's pushing back on my comment about elevating a team. What I said was nobody's proven they can lead the team to a title. And last I checked, there are no returning quarterbacks that have led a team to a title unless you want to act like Trinidad Chambliss's Fair State national championships are the same as winning a championship in college football. That's the whole point. None of them have proven that they can put a team on their shoulders. Dante Moore was the focal point of the offense, but look what happened when they played Indiana. They got dominated. That's the point. Can they put a team on their shoulders and lead them to a title? There is a combined 0 FBS national titles at the starting quarterback position in college football this season.
Trinidad is our number 1. And you and I went back and forth about that, and my justification is, one, I look at college quarter. I'm not worried about his NFL career. If he's a 4th round pick, I don't do it that way. For what Ole Miss does and him in the playoff and how he elevated that program, we were talking about that. I mean, they were on a heater because of him. He averaged over 300 passing yards in the playoffs. So he is a guy. Now,
my issue with Trinidad is not him. I don't know. Like, of a lot of the quarterbacks, he's the one whose supporting cast is worse than it was last year compared to other quarterbacks. Like, Arch is going to be surrounded by better talent. I think overall CJ will. I think Julian Sayin will. I think Dante Moore definitely will because of all the injuries and guys coming back. My concern with Trinidad is more so he's not playing for Lane and Charlie Weiss Jr. anymore, and the supporting cast around him is not going to be as good. With all due respect to Kawan Lacey, yes, he will be very good, but that receiving core is not going to be as good. And I don't think the offensive line is going to be as good, and the system's not the same. That it's not so much that we disagree on Trinidad as a player. No. You can't dispute what he did last season. It's more so I don't think he's going to have the same talent around him to allow him to repeat or replicate what he did last season. That's my bigger concern.
And the other guy, and this is close to home here, but I don't think I've ever seen a returning Heisman finalist be undersold as much as Julian Sayin is being undersold. He had a 77% completion percentage. He is throwing to, I think he's almost penalized because he's throwing to the Cadillac receiving room they have. Yeah, not his fault.
We had that conversation the other day, Bill, and yes, we're talking about Notre Dame, but I'd like getting your thoughts on other things. Here's my take on. I feel like I found myself defending Indiana and Julian Sayin this offseason, which is kind of an odd place for me to be.
That's a really odd place for you.
I
Brian.
feel like with Julian Sayin, well, it's because I give you my honest opinion, and sometimes they just differ. But like Yes, I don't think Julian Sayin is as talented as CJ Carr or Dante Moore or Arch Manning or several other quarterbacks, but he also didn't do the things he did last year by accident. It's not like he's just he's completing 77% of his passes, and you put any quarterback in the country in that offense, and they're going to do the same thing. Kyle McCord would like a word with you on that about whether or not you can do that. And it's kind of like, do I think he's the number one quarterback in the country? No, because I do think your physical talent should be part of the conversation, but people act like he's like a Danny Warfel, reincarnated talent-wise, and I don't agree with that either. And I think almost kind of like he is banged for how conservative the system got last year.
Very true.
More so than anything. But he's a good quarterback.
Right. We'll see what Arthur Smith does there as the new offensive coordinator. I think he can throw the ball down the field a little better than given credit for. And I think he's also a victim of, as you are at Notre Dame or Alabama or places like that, that everybody's looking at the next guy. Tavian St. Clair is huge. I've seen him at practices.
Literally and figuratively, right?
I mean, a huge man that, and there's some potential you always want to see the next guy. Right. So I think that'll be interesting, but I think Julian Sayin's more than enough, not to derail this to Ohio State or anything, but I think any one of those quarterbacks, any one of those teams, and Notre Dame absolutely fits in the conversation. And like I said, just staring at their schedule, I'm like, there's not 3 losses on that schedule. There might be 2.
Unless they just completely lay an egg as a football team.
Correct. And the games that they have, the SMU game is really intriguing to me. That's the game that stands out even more than Miami in some ways, because I really like what Rhett Lashley's put together there. They have Kemp and Jennings. The last time they played, I did look that up. I think we pointed it out. That was the Lou Holtz. They were post-death penalty, and I think Notre Dame just scored another touchdown in that game. It was a big number. That's a Troche trivia type.
That's nothing compared to what Houston did to them that year. We talked about this last week. Houston had over 90 points in that game and over 1,000 yards of offense.
I couldn't watch that. So, that's where I'm at. I mean, is there anything, Trevor, is there anything I'm missing with Notre Dame that you read in our preview? Or I don't know if you've read it yet. Like, is there something that maybe we overlooked?
Oh, overlooked? No. I mean, all the points that you have about Notre Dame, we're a lot in agreement with. There's some things that they have to show about, what is post Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price life like for this offense. I'm with you. I think their offensive line is going to be back to the standard, and not the standard of just being a good unit. We've talked a lot this offseason about Joe Rudolph has put together a lot of good units. Can you be a championship caliber unit? Because when you're the school that has had Joe Moore Award winners and guys like Joe Alt and Quincy Nelson and Mike McGlinchey come through, that is the standard to have an elite offensive line. I'm with you. My question was more around just your view on the college football playoff as a whole. Talked a lot about Notre Dame, who was FanDuel's second favorite to win the national title this year. They're the favorite on FanDuel to make the playoffs in general. I know what Sporting News put out. You have Notre Dame in the national title game, but how do you specifically see the playoff panning out?
Yeah, I mean, usual struggle. I mean, all of those teams we've already talked about in. I guess my sleeper team that's in that you don't feel, it's not even a sleeper. I think USC could get in. Now, you look at their schedule, they're going to have to take care of business in a couple games. Like, for example, they will head to Penn State for a whiteout. There's
not being soft. They're
going to have to they can run the ball, but they're going to have to play some D with Gary Patterson. We have them as that. I was kind of struggling with who's that last team you want to put in. They're one that I like. They play Ohio State out at the Coliseum this year. That's another big spot for Lincoln Riley. And if they don't, and our 1-to-1 38 coaching list is coming out here in about a week, that'll be hours of talk for Brian looking at that with me. But the Lincoln Riley keeps sliding down that ranking, because you can't go off the Oklahoma success anymore, and they've got to show us at some point. Mm-hmm. Another team that I was asked about that I do think is a potential sleeper, I really like the coach. I really like the program. Notre Dame's played this team over the years. I like Louisville. Mm-hmm. I like Jeff Brom. I think he's one of the best and underrated coaches in the game. I like their schedule. Just saw, I believe today, that was
NC State,
Virginia, which was one of those was not a conference game, even though it was last year.
Don't even get me started on the ACC having all these non-conference games.
They were supposed to play in Brazil. What are we doing? But anyway, Louisville, Lincoln Keenholz, Ohio State transfer, 2 good running backs. Clev Lubin comes back on defense.
He is the most underrated defensive end of the country, even more so than Boubacar Traore.
That you have on my radar. Boubacar's on my radar.
Clev is a dude.
Yeah. He can get
He is
get
a
after
dude.
it. So they've got the pieces to maybe be that team. But
it's about, they're kind of like Miami pre-2025. Can you just avoid the dumb losses that make no sense?
Right.
Like that's the thing. Like, what was it, 2 years ago? They went out and like just dominated Clemson. And then like a week later went out and lost wasn't it Stanford? Didn't they do that? Yes, they
did it last year. They beat Miami and then they lose after that.
Yeah, they went on the road and beat yes, they went on the road 2014. They went on the road, beat Clemson, then the next week lost to frickin' Stanford. And then last year they beat Miami and then beat Virginia Tech or Boston College, then beat Virginia Tech on the road and then lose at home to Cal, at home to Clemson. It's like, what are you guys doing? That's the thing that for Coach Brom is if he can get that team to be a little bit more disciplined, they're going to become a force in the ACC.
And one of your comments, Brom 0-5 after top 10 wins. I assume that stats backs up to Purdue.
Yeah.
And, I like where they're.
Yeah. That stat is also, I don't know if that stat's still accurate because they beat Miami this year and won their next game. So that was one difference between this year and last year was they did get that win. So they're
my back.
That's the yeah, you're back, but that's the exception. They did get a win after beating number 2 Miami last year. So looks like Bill's having some technical difficulties at his house, but yeah, I like the Louisville pick, Trev, as a potential playoff team, and just so we kind of go through Bill's playoff picks from this year. He's got number 1 Indiana, number 2 Georgia, number 3 Ohio, or number 4 Ohio State, and he's got Notre Dame number 3, which I thought was very interesting. And then when you look at the rest, so he's got the 5-12 matchup is Texas Boise State, the 6-11 matchup is Oregon BYU, so that's one of 2 Notre Dame opponents in the playoff. Then there's the 7-10 Miami USC matchup. That's one playoff team one Notre Dame opponent versus another team that's afraid to play Notre Dame. And then the 8-9 Ole Miss Oklahoma. Don't agree on Ole Miss, but I'm glad that you have Oklahoma in. I actually think this Oklahoma team, Bill, is going to be a lot better than last year's Oklahoma team. I like this Oklahoma team.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
I had a little audio malfunction there. Sorry, but definitely that's from kicking the wire here. But yeah, I mean, I think our playoff field, Trev was asking, is solid. We like the 12 that we put in. You could, once you get into that 13 through 18, like, would LSU or Michigan, or I mentioned Louisville, SMU, would those teams crack it? Absolutely, they'll have a chance, which, maybe is an interesting segue to, I definitely wanted to talk about the 2014 playoff with you guys.
Let's do it.
Let's get into that now. We
I don't want to get too much into your playoff predictions because I want people to buy the magazine and kind of
right. Well,
I want to clear up one thing real quick. You in your writing weren't that far off on the offensive line. You actually had Knapp at tackle. You had Gerby at right tackle. It was whoever did your depth chart,
right?
Well, Jagasol, but that's just because he's injured. If he wasn't injured, he'd be at right guard. But it's it's whoever did the depth chart that was way off.
Well, I didn't do
what
I just wrote the previews and stressed out enough about those. But so we had Scott Docterman on today with the Athletic. Solid, covers the Big Ten, Iowa guy. He, came up covering Iowa, and he was very, very in favor of the 2014 playoff. And I think, I never say something behind somebody's back that I wouldn't say to their face. And we had some mild I was probably on my end less fired up about it, but he had a good premise. And, he presented a very good case, but I still can't get there, right? Like that was, I've been a big proponent of 16. I think 16 is the number. 24 turns into, and here's the one thing I was talking about, and I'll tell you guys, it's like Notre Dame last year would have been, when I wrote that, or they would have been like the 15 or 14 seed, right? Or even 12 when you factor in the other teams.
In a 16-team playoff, I believe Notre Dame would have been 11.
Okay.
So they wouldn't have got leaped. The Tulane and JMU would have still been behind them in a 16-team playoff. They'd have been 15 and 16. So Notre Dame would have been 11.
So we, I dug into how that would work a couple weeks ago. And so let's look at, so that matchup would have been, I'm trying to pull this up. Notre Dame's first round matchup would have been number 11 Notre Dame versus number 22 Georgia Tech, which also was the game on Rudy when they played Georgia Tech. And I might be more excited to rewatch the game on Rudy than I would a matchup because I know Rudy's going to get the tackle than I would a first-round matchup in the middle of December between Notre Dame and Georgia Tech, where I'm fairly certain Notre Dame would be a double-digit favorite in that game, the way Georgia Tech was playing defense at the end of the year. So my point is it's too much. There is a threshold.
About that number 13 Texas against number 19 Virginia game.
Well, no, there's a threshold where there's too much football, and you're already going head-to-head with the NFL. It is December. One of the things, and I think Scott did agree with me on this, one of the things I detest is this comparison to the NCAA men's basketball tournament. And I made a joke about it this morning. I said, men's schedule vasectomies around the NCAA tournament because there are 48 games played in 4 days. The college football playoff already takes entirely too much time. There's so much. It needs to be compressed. I think you can in 16. And if we were at 16 last year, Notre Dame absolutely would have been in, along with BYU, Texas, and Vandy, the last schools that I think were actually playoff caliber. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't think you're ever going to get more than 13-ish teams that are truly have a chance to win, to do damage in the playoffs. And to me, it's not the standard shouldn't necessarily be who has a chance to win it all. It's where's the cutoff to teams that can actually do something in the postseason. In some years, that's going to be 5 or 6. I mean, in other years, I think that could be in today's era of portal and other stuff. I think you could go lower. I think Notre Dame could have gone on a run at 11, maybe Texas. I'm not as sold on Texas last year as others. I think people want to pretend like, let's just ignore the fact that Georgia destroyed them in November.
they destroyed them in the fourth quarter. I remember that.
And the whole thing that bothers me, like, oh, well, we're not in because we lost Ohio State. No, you're not in because you got dominated by a 4-8 Florida team where you led for a grand total of 0 seconds in that football game. But they could have won a game. I mean, if they're in there in a 16-team playoff and they're playing number 4, who was number 4 at the end of that, Bill? They would have been playing number 4 Texas Tech. I think Texas could have beat Texas Tech.
Right.
I mean, heck, if you listen to Steve Sarkisian, they could beat Texas Tech with their backups. Their 2s and their 3s, apparently.
Trev, what's your number?
12 is my number.
12,
24 is way too. I detest the 2014 playoffs. It's putrid.
Well, and then we got into a little bit about the Michigan-Ohio State thing, and so here's a couple thoughts on that. As you guys, Big Ten Bill has to strike here. One, the notion that game, the nature of it changes. Yes, it does. It absolutely does. I think they would move it. They would consider moving it off that.
They've talked about that before. We've heard,
and they've already talked about it. I think it could become something similar to like Oklahoma, Texas, where they played at that point in the schedule.
Just gross.
Would teams sit starters at the end? They like Ward Manuel insists no, and Ohio State insists no.
Bull.
If you've got to play 4 or 5 playoff games afterward, you will do it.
Are you just gonna do? Are they gonna sit healthy players? No, I don't think so, because seeding matters. But like, if your star running back has a injured ankle, you're gonna sit him. If minor, I mean, there are decisions you're gonna make where guys would otherwise absolutely play.
I've watched,
and now you're making winning and losing not mattering. And people can say all they want. Oh, it's not going to do this. It's not going to do that. Like that. And I'm sorry. I am so tired of SEC people saying he never said they could beat Texas Tech. Yes, he did. He didn't say directly Texas Tech. He said we would dominate that schedule. Well, Texas Tech can't even dominate that schedule. So if there are teams that can beat Texas Tech, then clearly you also think you can go beat Texas Tech. You don't have to say it for us to all be smart enough to know exactly what he said. We don't always have to run cover for the SEC teams, my guy, Big. But he did, in fact, say we would dominate their schedule. And since Texas Tech hasn't gone undefeated against that schedule, therefore, we're not idiots. But I want to say this about the 2014 playoffs. So Trev and I, the only opinion we have is 12 versus 16. I'm just like, screw it. Let's go to 16, get rid of buys.
Yep. Me too.
That's where I'm at, because I do think the current system creates an unfair. You're almost punished by being a top 4 seed right now in the system. The only way that I'd be okay with 12, and this is something Trevor and I haven't thought about, so I'd love to get your guys' opinion. The only way I'm going to be good with 12 is if they move the calendar up. Like a 12-team playoff, you can move the calendar up and be done the weekend of New Year's. Like, hey, look, let's get rid of conference championships, or just say, hey, we're going to start the playoffs the week after conference championships, and you guys decide whether you want to play in the conference championships or not. That's up to you. I'd say get rid of conference championships, which they're not going to do.
But
But
the
move
SEC
the process
won't
up. Right, exactly. Because
They're
it's all
killing
about
me
money.
on that. They're killing me, Brian.
Yeah.
They're killing me because I keep presenting it this way. We could do what we do now. We could do this 2014 playoff, and you guys can watch Georgia Tech play Notre Dame in that game. Or, which I think is the best option, is you go to a 16-team playoff. I believe the 11 versus 6 game would be, just looking off this right now, it'd be like last year you would have watched
Notre Dame and Ole Miss.
That's a ball game right there.
Yeah, Notre Dame coming down to Oxford for the, come on, that hasn't happened since I think the year I was born.
And we're getting, from up here, I said, you're not getting a conference championship game. Your trade-off is you Ohio State 2 seed. I'm sorry, I was muted there for a second. I didn't know what I did. Ohio State 2 seed, Utah 15. No conference championship game. Winner gets Miami or Texas A&M.
Mm-hmm.
Better product by far. And I think I'm taking that over. And if Trev likes the 12, sorry. If you like the 12 and we want to stay there for a little bit longer and see how they've worked out kinks each year, it's not bad. I'm good with 12 compared to 24.
Compared to 24, that's a no-brainer. 12 to 24 is no-brainer. I want to ask, just real quick, Trev, I want to ask Bill, I want to make this quick point, and then, Trev, you take over. People say, well, to me, this benefits Notre Dame to expand to 24. I don't care. It's not good for college football. Notre Dame goes from a home seed versus a 22 in one format to a road team versus number 6 in the other. It's good for Notre Dame to go to the 24 because, as I just mentioned, they can then avoid having to go to Oxford in round 1 or Columbus or Athens in round 1. Now all of a sudden they're the home seed against a far inferior opponent. So this isn't like, self-serving for Notre Dame. I think it's better for Notre Dame to go home because Notre Dame will hardly ever in a 2014 playoff not be a home team. And if they are not a home team, they weren't that good that year.
Right.
And so I don't think this is better for those teams. I think this is better for those teams. I just don't think it's good for the game. Go ahead, Trev.
I'm with you on that completely. It's not better for the game. As far as 12-team playoff goes, the two fixes that I would do if it were to be elevated from where it's at now, I agree with moving up the calendar, and you have to fix how you do the G5 bids. Not get rid of them because that you open up Pandora's box, I think, if you try to eliminate G5 games. But there needs to be very specific wording around how the G5 gets a bid. Because the crazy thing is like, the 4 highest ranked conference champion winners automatically get in, and 24 is a little different than it was in 25. A G5 conference winner has been amongst the 4 top ranked conference winners the last 2 years. And then they also got James Madison in this past year because then the G5 also gets an automatic bid, if I'm remembering that correctly. So I think there also has to be wording change to there can't be 2 G5 teams in the playoffs because I'm also a big proponent of, I think the majority
unless they've earned it with their ranking.
Exactly.
You've got Boise State
from
24 with UCF from back in the day, right?
Sure.
John Steinbrecker's comments, the MAC commissioners, they're going to stand up for that. They're not the theory of them doing their own playoff. I don't think that happens in this situation. I've gone through it many times with Brian, I think, actually, that as an OU grad, Ohio University, I would love to see them get in there at some point. Just, if they ever got, and they were the 16 seed or the 15 seed, and they got to go play Tennessee or whoever, I'm going to that game. Not as a writer. I'm taking that weekend off and going to that game and wearing my Bobcats shirt. And, that dream's there. I would say if they earn their way in, though, like you say, there can only be one. Well, we had years in the BCS era where TCU and Boise were in that. Boise didn't get a national title shot. They probably should have got one in the BCS era. So I'm good with that, Trav, as long as they earn it. But in general, You're right. We could put it this way too. I would meet it this way. If a Group of 5 school or the Group of 5 champion, the best one was ranked number 17, well, you're not in.
Yeah,
I could live with that.
I think I would see. Here's my only issue with that, Bill, is I would make it the standard a little bit lower, simply because then you get into a committee that is known to manipulate rankings to get the desired result. You got to give that G5 team a little bit more leeway to not get screwed. Right. That's my only pushback. But then again, you look at it so Boise State, for example, 2 years ago, they would have been in at number 9. You know,
Yeah.
they were a top 10
Right.
team. They deserve to be in. I think there's, you know, if you're making it in the top 16, 18, something like that, because we've seen the committee screw people over. Notre Dame's not the only one. I mean, Florida State got screwed over a couple of years ago. I mean, you can't make it so narrow that it's just easy to bump a team down. This is like the whole thing with the 12. If Notre Dame's in the top 12, if Notre Dame's even close to the top 12, if they're even close to the number 12, like they're not 5 or 6, they can easily just drop them down for no reason whatsoever. We just saw them do that.
Right.
You know, so like there's got to be some protection, not so much for Notre Dame, but more so for those G5s. I mean, I understand that. I still think it's a complete missed opportunity to not have an 8-team G5 playoff.
I do, but I think they would prefer. The problem with this, and I'm not disagreeing with you at all. That team that I think, say you're the best G5 team, so you're Tulane last year, you're the highest ranked, whatever. They would rather be in the 12-team dance than they would,
right? Because they want the payout.
Playoffs.
That's
separate.
The only reason is because they want the payout,
right? And if you're in that 18-team playoffs separately, that team's gonna be like, well, we're the second best G6 school, you know. But the spice of it to me is that it would be. I watch all of Ohio University's bowl games. I do. I watched I got to get this right. They were in the Scooters Coffee Bowl last year against UNLV. There weren't a lot of. Kimberly went to bed. She's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm watching the Scooters Coffee Bowl because we're played Calandria, by the way, that Nebraska transfer QB, and ran them off the field as an underdog with Dan Mullen, and I enjoyed every second of it. But would I enjoy that UNLV OU game as a G6 quarterfinal? I would, and the Gamblers would. But I would love to see what would the comparison be to the TV ratings there versus the TV ratings as a G6 quarterfinal. They'd have to come up with a better name for it. You know, that's interesting. And the other thing,
final probably not higher, but semifinals and title game. I mean, I promise you right now, there'd be more than 6,500 freaking people in the stands, which is how many people were in the stands for the UNLV Ohio game.
And they're going to have to do better than the first. If they did a 2014 playoff, the first round games would have to do better than, you know, the 8 million range that watched the Pop-Tarts Bowl. And not just because the cinnamon Pop-Tart jumped in the toaster or whatever. It was because BYU Georgia Tech was a compelling football game. It was a very good football game, start to finish. And these first round matchups, the Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, the Iowa, I believe we had Iowa, Miami would be one. They have to clear that number. Otherwise, you're just, and I don't know that they would. Maybe. Depends on if the NFL feels like, you know what, we're going to throw Myles Garrett and the Rams against the Seahawks in that window just to do it. And they would. So there's a lot of factors there that I also think need to be thought through. And if anything has been proven, Brian, it's that the NFL does not care about your college football schedule.
No, and that's honestly where another area where Congress is going to have to step in. And now they are sniffing around their exemptions to the NFL, saying, hey, we're not a big fan of some of the things you're doing with your TV, and so we're going to look into whether or not we want to keep giving you guys the same perks. I think if they get to that conversation, that's one thing they should do is say, listen, we gave you this exemption for 2 days. You get Sunday and you get Monday. That's your day. Saturday is for college football. But you know what? College football kind of brought this on themselves as well, because now we get college football games basically every day of the week.
Right.
Now,
yeah, I agree.
And so it's a jacked up process. But anyway, Bill, you and I are on the same page. 2014 playoff is ridiculous. I mean, if I was king of the world, I'd make it even smaller. I'd go to 8. Trevor and I have talked about that. Well, you know my ultimate plan, Bill, and you and I have talked about that, but that'll just never happen. Which is
I'm good with 8.
Go back to the old bowl games,
the
old bowl times, the Rose Bowl, and then pick your 4 or 8 after that, something like that. You know, I would be fine with that.
Well, and you know what? Real quick, like I'm guessing you have really loyal following here. Great comments in the comment section. How many of your listeners, if you put up a poll, like, do you want 24 teams? They're not servicing the fans here. That's probably
no.
I gauge a lot of my content, at least a fair amount, on my threads and friends. They're fans of college football. They're fans of, they don't watch it maybe like we do. And I'm not saying it we are nerdy on some level, right? We're breaking down every stat, every play, every out. You guys break down like every ounce of Notre Dame football for your listeners. They're more like, I haven't heard one of them say, yeah, I want 24. We would get into the 8 and 16 debate. One of my best friends really loves 8 and has a similar. The other one's 16 or 24. They're like, I don't want to watch 2014 playoff. Granted, again, the bubble I'm living in. It's a big scarlet and gray bubble where Ohio State knows they're going to get in this thing in every year anyway.
But Ohio State fans also don't want to see their team get in at number 19.
Correct.
That's the other thing is like there are fan base. If you're a Kansas State fan, you're probably thinking 2014 playoff is a wonderful idea. Again, I think that all goes back to a mindset that we have created because of TV revenue that has made it playoff or bust. And I think that somehow, some way, shape, form, or fashion, we have to try and fix that.
I agree.
As a fan base and in a lot of other ways. But anyway, yeah, Bill, I honestly don't know very many people other than people who just like either A, like being contrarian, B, people that just agree with whatever their conference tells them to agree with. Like I've seen people that are, I hate 24. And then as soon as Tony Petitti says 24, they're like, I love 24. You're always going to get those people. But like Pete Pavakwa's advocated for 24. He's wrong. Two guys that host show. I mean, Sean Stiers and Vince D'Addario, who host show for us, have advocated for 24. I just think they're dead wrong. I think their arguments are terrible for it. But like, there's just very few people that I know that can make a sound argument. My constant response is, okay, then why not go to 48? That's what I ask every time. Why not go to 48? Because every argument that you're going to make for a 40 to not go 48 is the exact same argument that I'm going to make for why 24 is stupid.
Or why Trev could make the 12-team argument. And again, we haven't really let it bubble. We've tweaked. I like how each year of the 12, we've tweaked something. We've got some tweaks coming in this year.
Year one was terrible. Like it was so obvious that the conference tie-ins thing was dumb to the top 4 seeds. I was glad they fixed that quick.
Yeah, and then now like Duke, for example, with the tweaks to this year, Duke last year would get in because they're going to play it. Now, how long and how patient we are with that. That was I will admit the ACC had an extreme case last year. Extreme case.
And they're still not going to fix their freaking tiebreaker system.
Right.
Which is just
like
stupid.
I would be, but that's again, if you were Jim Phillips or college football czar, I would have like override power, but you get sued. But I would still say, you know what? We're putting Miami in there. Sorry, Duke.
Yeah.
There's like
just make it to where if your conference, if there's a tie, the 2 highest ranked teams in your college football playoff rankings get in. It's not that freaking hard.
Right. And then the Big Ten has, I mean, like, I will say this, one of the things that's happened with conference championship games, I probably said it on here, that last weekend when I'm putting together things and trying to get the playoff field set for us, I watched the game that has more impact on the playoff than I do. Like Indiana, Ohio State, I had on. Great game. But I was probably watching that ACC title game more because I knew I had a direct impact on the playoff picture. Indiana, Ohio State was, one of these guys is 1, one's 4. A great game. Indiana wins, whatever, helps them set up. But, same with like if that Big 12 game's 2 teams and winners in, I'm going to be more locked into that. But I still think we can get rid of those.
Yeah, agree. Well, Bill, let's tell people where they can find, tell them a little bit about your magazine and where they can find it before we get out of here.
Look, so again, for your listeners who haven't seen it, it's
got mine right here. Bill, you're muted, buddy. You muted yourself. There
I did that. I've done that like 3 times.
I'm
so excited about this cover. As you know, in the magazine business, in order to sell magazines, you have to put Arch Manning on the front. So he's on there with CJ and Dante and Gunnar Stockton. You know what? It was so fun to do because we haven't had it for about 8 or 9 years. And great part of the summer, to me, the summer tradition is you go on vacation, you go to a lacrosse tournament, like you go all the places we're going to be. But I always love when you're out on the beach or whatever and you see somebody holding this thing or holding, even if it's Athlon or whoever, or Phil Steele. I'm like, that's college football fan right there. So hopefully you get the front of the book was fun. There's a Notre Dame preview. I believe CJ Carr's right there in our Heisman.
The first team you guys did, actually. Yeah. If you look at the magazine, team you preview was Notre Dame.
I wrote a lot of Big Ten previews, as your listeners can probably expect. But it was great to put together. And it's always great to come on with you guys. I know we can get going a little bit, but so much fun talking about those programs that, like Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, the ones that I'm listening and reading to about. And you always kind of pinch yourself a little bit. You'd be like, I have a Notre Dame preview in that book. That's pretty cool. So with the tradition,
I wrote the Athlon Notre Dame preview the last couple of years, not this year because we're not with Athlon, but that was a pretty cool, okay.
Yeah, like you
This
look
is
at
pretty
it,
awesome. Like I've been reading this my
fun.
whole life, and now it's like when I first went to work at BGI with Loose Emoji. I was like, dude, I was a kid couldn't wait to read Tim Priester and Loose Emoji, and then you get a chance to write for it. You're like, dude, this is freaking awesome.
Yeah, so check it out. A big yellow cover for Green Bay, of course. No, that wasn't my idea. That was the decision makers that made that. But
it almost matches Notre Dame's pants half the freaking time.
The thing's bright. You won't miss it on the stands. But I appreciate talking to you guys as always. This was a lot of fun, and check us out over at Sporting News. I think pretty shortly we should come on. I am doing 1-to-138 coaches for next week.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go do that when I get off here. And there are plenty of arguments to be had there as well.
Oh yeah, we had an interesting conversation about top coaches for sure. Trev, I think preseason magazines are a great idea. I think they're a great idea.
I do too.
Yeah, interesting. Well, Bill, my friend, we're gonna have you back on. I also want to have an interesting debate with you of who will be better in 2026, the Big Ten or the SEC. And what are the criteria for that? So we could either do that on your show or maybe on ours, whatever. Yeah. But I think that'd be a fun conversation. Number one, I think there's a good debate to have on what defines the best conference. Because I love how the SEC used to say, well, it's about who wins the championships. Now they're like, no, it's the depth of the conference. Like, yeah, that's what other Big Ten used to say that when you guys would win the title and the Big Ten would have like 4 of the next 6 best teams. It was like, yeah, but we won the title. Now you guys aren't even sniffing the title. And it's like, well, look how many good teams we have every year. I think it's hilarious, but I think that'd be a fun little.
Yeah, we can do that next week or whenever you guys want to have me on, just let me know.
Love it. All right, Bill, thanks for being with us today, man. Appreciate you.
Brian, up next year on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends. That was fun. That was good. Bill's one of those guys you can just sit and talk ball with for hours.
Yes. Yeah.
100%.
We were going to have him on for 30 minutes. I was like, no, we're going to have you on for 30 minutes, dude. It went 52 minutes. Yeah.
No, I'm with you. Up next here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Brian, you and I are two guys that firmly believe that Notre Dame is in prime position to win a national title this season. And there's a lot of reasons as to why. We brought it up in other shows. When we're doing position previews, talking about CJ Carr's Heisman odds and talking about the playoff odds. We're always talking about how we think Notre Dame can go win a championship. Now we're going to dive into the why. And what are the things working in their favor for them to become national champions and win their first one since 1988? And that's where we start this discussion.
Yeah, so the premise of these next 2 segments is we're going to start with a premise. Notre Dame is going to win the national championships in 2026 because of insert reasons. And then part 2 will be Notre Dame won't win a national championship in 2026 and the insert reasons. So it's sort of setting a premise and then explaining why that premise will be true. And so that's why I think it's going to be fun, Trev, as opposed to just like, here's the strengths of the team and, going through each individual players. It's kind of looking at just from a different point of view of like, they're going to win it all. And here are the reasons why they're going to win it all. And when you look at this football team, I think one thing that you can't deny for this Notre Dame football team is sometimes it's the outside influences that properly give you the kick in the pants or the focus or the whatever the motivation you need. And I think the first thing I'll look at when I talk about why this Notre Dame football team is going to win a title in 2026, they have proper motivation. The leave no doubt thing is not just like every team has slogans, right? Like when I played college football, we had, every year we had new team shirts and they always had some new unity or whatever. And they were just slogans and you tried to build your team around it. Now the slogan is like the slogan presented itself. There was like, we didn't have to sit down with the head coach and what are we going to do this year? It's like, dude, I mean, it was just gifted to us. Leave no doubt, this revenge tour type of thing. I think the motivation for this season is obvious beyond just the normal, hey, we want to be champs, we want to be great. Just there's that added fuel. I think you got to start with that.
Without a doubt. Why do we love college football, man? It's one of the only sports that can be very influenced by a lot of the narratives around the sport. When I mean influenced, I mean the outside factors, in my opinion, play a bigger role in college sports, especially college football, than any others. There's narratives that you can try to find in the NFL or in the NBA, and there's trade drama and things like that. But college football, above all else, there is so much. It's one of my buddies phrased it perfect. It's like the world's greatest soap opera. It's like the world's greatest reality TV show. And for Notre Dame, a lot of the motive that they have this year, it's organic. Like, you can come up with whatever catchy slogan you want. To your point, is silence the critics. You can do all of these other things, but with Notre Dame, it was very organic based on the things that happened this past season. Going into 2025, it felt a little organic, like they had the SAS shirts on when they were going through training, and it's because they made the championship game, but they weren't able to win it. And I understood it and I appreciated it at the time, but when you have this level of motivation coming into a season with a clear-cut goal, we had concerns last year in 2025 about, like, look, man, what's going to motivate this team? Can you still pull on the strings of that Northern Illinois loss, something that fueled their 13-game win streak in 2024? I don't know. What is that going to be this year? And we don't know what that's going to look like. I'm not saying the reason they lost to Miami and Texas A&M is because they didn't have a rallying cry. But this year, it is clear-cut, no debate what's in front of them, and I think that's awesome.
Because the things that were legitimate concerns about last year's teams just aren't there anymore. And so now it's like, you've got to just not get in your own way. That's a big thing. Get there. Now, again, we're going to try to get to a mailbag today. So if you guys do have some questions, go and throw those in. Obviously prefer about these topics, but also if you have some questions about the hearing that went on today, you can ask about those as well. But look, you can be as motivated as you want to be. BYU's motivated from not being gotten into the playoffs last year. Texas is motivated, but the rosters for those two teams and compared to Notre Dame, they're all very different. BYU can be as motivated as they want. They don't have the roster to get to the playoff and then go make a run. They have the roster to get to the playoffs, but this is a little bit of a different deal. And so you want to make a run, you got to have a big-time roster. That's where something I don't think Indiana gets enough credit for how talented their team was last year. We keep talking about, great coaching. And yes, that's all true, but they had dudes on that football team last year as well, Trev. And when you look at this Notre Dame rosters, we broke down a month or so ago when we ranked the rosters, this team has one of the best rosters in college football. And that is a reason why Notre Dame will win the national championship this year, because they have a roster to do so. What does that mean? It means when you look at it, Trev, it's like, what makes an elite roster? You got to have talent in the trenches. You've got to have, and they've got that. You've got to have athleticism, speed. They've got that. It helps to have a big-time quarterback. It's not necessary. Ohio State won 2 years ago without a big-time quarterback. My counter would be, yes, but none of the teams had a big-time quarterback if you look at like the NFL draft. But I would argue that Notre Dame made a run to the championship game because of who they had at quarterback. Was a big reason why. Last year you look at the teams that made runs. Darian Mensah put that team on his shoulders and could only get so far. Clearly couldn't do enough to get him to the title game. Carson Beck did what he did last year. So Dante Moore did what he did until the semifinals. Having a quarterback helps. This is the deepest receiving core, most athletic receiving core they've had since probably 2015. From an athleticism standpoint, deep from a depth standpoint, I don't know that they've ever been as deep as they are now. You lose some big time talent at running back, but you've got some talented guys there. Same thing on the other side of the ball. Number one linebacking core. Don't even just take our word for it. Look at Afon. They have Notre Dame as the number 2 D line in the country, the number 2 linebacker unit in the country, the number 1 secondary in the country, the number 1 offensive line in the country, the number 9 receiving core in the country, and the number 4 quarterback room in the country. It's not just us. It's them as well. And so when you look at it, and for the chat, we're talking about reasons why they will win it right now. It's like some people just want to jump right into why they won't win it. We're talking about why they will win it. You can't win without big-time talent. And this Notre Dame team has the kind of talent where your margin for error isn't like super, super, super thin, because you have good talent but not great talent, so you need everything to go right. That's not the case for this Notre Dame football team. They don't have to be 100% maximized every player across the board to have a shot to win it all. They have the kind of roster that even not only can win it all, but gives them some buffer. They don't always have to play their best football to still beat teams. I thought they didn't play very well against USC at all last year. Still beat them by 10. And should have been way worse than that.
You got to have an elite roster to be able to contend and win a national title. With you completely. You used a perfect analogy yesterday. You were talking about, hey, you can be a 5-star chef, but if you don't have any of the ingredients, what are we doing here? Gordon Ramsay can walk into my kitchen, but if I don't have creme fraiche and a bunch of duck, like, I don't know what kind of meal he can make. What did you say yesterday? Cottage cheese and
cottage cheese are like Rice Krispie treats.
Cottage cheese like Rice Krispie treats.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean,
you're limited on what you can make there, brother.
Yeah.
Make
Notre
me
Dame's
dinner.
roster
Here you go. Okay.
Notre Dame's roster is filled with much more than just Rice Krispie treats and cottage cheese. But the thing that I appreciate about this roster is the talent is distributed very well throughout the roster. We've seen Notre Dame teams before in the past that have 2015, Jalen Smith is the best linebacker in college football.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't have a defensive end that you could argue is in the top 5. They don't have a secondary unit. You could try to argue in the top 5. Some things would have to pan out. Offensive line, you could have that conversation. Running back, I don't know. You could argue top 5. Quarterback, I don't know. You could argue top 5. We could have, after watching the performance of what Malik and then Deshaun did, but having a quarterback that's a Heisman favorite on FanDuel is always going to play well into your favor. But I'm with you. It's not the only thing that you need. This roster is absolutely elite, and you need that top level of talent if you're going to go on any sort of run.
Yeah, no question. And when you talk about talent, let's kind of build on a couple things. Number one, star power. As you mentioned, Trev, you have arguably the best quarterback in the country. You have arguably a top 3 to 4 group of skill set as a whole. You have arguably the best cornerback in the country. You have arguably the best safety tandem in the country. You have arguably the best linebacker room in the country. And it's not just because of the depth, it's also their star power. You're seeing more and more love for Kingston Viliama-Asas potentially maybe being the best linebacker in college football, and he doesn't even start for Notre Dame. You have arguably you have star power at defensive end. You have star power potential on the offensive line. It's not just Jeremiah Love, Leonard Moore, and a bunch of okay players. It's or CJ Carr and Leonard Moore and a bunch of okay players. It's you have CJ Carr and Leonard Moore, and it's not even a given. There's a world in which neither one of them are the number 1 drafted Notre Dame player next year. I mean, there's a world where Boubacar has the kind of breakout, though. He might even go higher, or a Gerby might even go. I mean, it's not likely, but there's a debate to be had about that. And I mean, I would argue that Caleb Downs is Ohio State's best player on defense last year. He wasn't their highest drafted player on defense. He wasn't even second. He was third. So that's kind of where it is, and I think Notre Dame kind of has that, and of course has that at quarterback. We've talked a lot about CJ Carr being that kind of player. You have an elite quarterback at that level, but beyond CJ Carr, who we've talked about ad nauseum, I think another reason why I feel more confident about this year's team than last year's team is I am way more confident that they have the talent on the offensive line and in the right places on the offensive line to also do that, because I don't know that Notre Dame can win a title without an elite offensive line unless there's a unique circumstance, which, obviously isn't there. Well, they almost did it in 2024. Yeah, but why didn't they win? Because they got beat in the trenches. It's the whole point. They could get to the show that we know that Notre Dame can get there. They did that in 2012. They did that in 2018. Did that in 2020. Did that in 2024. In 2 of those 4 years that we just talked about, Trev, they made it to the actual title game. Got beat by double digits both times. Why? They got beat in the trenches both times. It's not complicated to figure out. But this team, I think, has a chance to be different in that regard.
Without a doubt. Championship caliber offensive line play is something that you need throughout. Very, very few teams in the history of college football national champions have been able to win a national title in spite of the guys up front. Very few. People debate about the 2019 LSU team and if they were truly deserving of the Joe Moore Award that year. Some believe it was just kind of a byproduct of the Heisman winner, the Maxwell, the Biletnikoff. So I understand it. But point being, they still played in the biggest moments at the level that they needed to bring home that title. Notre Dame absolutely needs that. And now it's not as much of a pipe dream. There were things that we talked about last year with Anthony Napa. This is just an area he flat out has to get better. And I don't know if it's within his God-given ability to get better in this area. Not that he's bad. It's just I don't know if he's going to be a championship caliber left tackle. This year, I don't have those questions about Will Black. I had those questions about Emil Wagner. Everybody was obsessed with watching the depth chart in the roster and seeing where his weight would come in at. It's he's finally above 300. He's finally consistently above 303. It's okay, well, somebody putting on 11 pounds, let's see what that does to him athletically, and then we got our answer. I don't have those concerns about Gerby Lambert. My only concern along the offensive line is, can Ashton Craig stay healthy for an entire season? But we've even seen Joe Otting be very effective when he's in the starting lineup too, man. So I'm with you. Talent in the trenches is looking up.
I think it's so this isn't just, some of this stuff is okay, this helps you every year. Motivation helps every year. Roster being elite helps every year. Star power helps every year. The O-line, I think, being pretty good helps every year, but I think it's even more important this year, Trevor, because when I look at a lot of the top teams in college football, the one thing that they are is they're very good on the defensive line. Look, Texas has arguably the best defensive end in the country. So you say, well, I think I like Notre Dame's matchup against the Texas secondary. I actually do very much like that matchup, very much. But if you're in that game and the offensive line looks anything like it did in 2025, I don't know that CJ Carr is going to have the time to consistently take advantage of that matchup, which we saw against Miami last year, where I still say if that was a 7-on-7 game, I think Notre Dame beats Miami convincingly in game one. But then you throw the big boys in there, and they just dominated the Notre Dame offensive line in a way that Notre Dame's skill players could not do to the Miami secondary. And I've talked about this. There's a lot of plays last year. You go break down the film. There's a lot of plays last year where guys were either coming open or about to come open, and CJ couldn't find them because he couldn't go past his first read, if he could even get to his first read sometimes. And so like that, it matters. And so there's a lot of that this year. Texas is an example of that. Oregon, I think they're probably going to be my number one ranked D-line in the country when we have this conversation. Georgia should have some talented pass rushers this season. Ohio State lost some guys, but they've got some talented pass rushers coming back. You look at, Alabama with the Pierre kid has got a very talented edge rusher. Oklahoma's got a very talented defensive line. Just kind of going through some of the top teams in the country. Miami will be different than last year. Last year, they were about those big power guys. They don't have those big power guys this year, but they got two really athletic kids, Damon Wilson and Marquise Lightfoot, that can give you problems in a different way if you're not good up front. So I think specific to the season, if you want to make a run against this particular group of top teams, your offensive line has to be very good. You look at Indiana, it's another example. They lost the two ends they had last year, but then they go get Josh Burnham from the portal, and they get the two kids from Kansas State out of the portal who are very good football players. So your offensive line always has to be good, but even more true this season, their offensive line has to play at a very high level, Trevor, if this football team's going to have any chance to win 3 or 4 games, however much it takes them to win the championship game.
Without a doubt, trench play is going to have to be there, especially in the postseason. Another facet of this team that makes us feel good that will have to be there throughout the season and into the postseason are the portal players that they got. Those portal players that Notre Dame picked up this offseason addressed very key needs. And Notre Dame has done a really good job over the last several seasons addressing needs in the portal. They're not going out and just hunting for the big name or hunting for the highest ranked portal pickup person, but they are supplementing their roster in a way with portal players that has allowed them to be successful in certain areas. 24, they don't make the playoff run that they did without Riley Leonard, a portal guy. There's the portal players were all over the field against Georgia. You had Bo Collins' touchdown, R.J. Oben's strip sack. You had Jaden Harrison's kickoff return for a touchdown. And then obviously in 25, I don't know what the offense looks like without Malachi Fields in the boundary. Mm-hmm. I don't. Will Pauling, he led the team in receiving touchdowns this past season. Defensively, Jalen Stroman had one of the best individual safety performances I've seen a Notre Dame safety have. Not in 25, not in the Freeman era. I mean, just have in general. And this year they were able to do it. And I would argue the talent that they brought in is elevated from what it had been. Now, we have to see if they're going to be as good of players as Malachi Fields and Jalen Stroman in certain moments and Jordan Clark from 2024. We have to see if they're going to be as good of football players. But their talent ceilings are very, very high. Talking about the portal guys they brought in. They're going to play a huge role too.
I think in this era, the thing that can set you over the top is the portal. And not so much that I don't love teams that just completely build through the portal. I've kept trying to tell people this. You can't point to the number of transfers Indiana had and act like that's the reason why they won. And so let's go do what Indiana did, because as I've pointed out over and over and over again, just because those guys were new to Indiana doesn't mean they were new to that football staff or that football team. A big chunk of their transfers in year one were guys that had already played a year or two under that coaching staff. They simply followed that coaching staff to Indiana, which is not similar to what most teams that rebuild through the portal are doing. Lane Kiffin had 2 or 3 kids at the most. I didn't even remember any, but then I forgot about Dockery. I forgot about the DN that they had. There was I think maybe one other kid. That wasn't what we saw at Indiana. It was like a dozen, 15 kids or something like that came with it from James Madison. So it's a different scenario. But you have to have some portal impact, in my opinion, to win it all. I do believe that. You look at Ohio State in 2024, they didn't have a lot of portal guys, and Notre Dame didn't have a lot of portal guys. Texas didn't have a lot of portal guys, but the portal guys they got were impactful. You know, Ohio State had what? Like really 5 portal guys that were impactful in the playoffs. Will Howard, you had obviously the running back, you had Judkins, you had Davison Edbignosin, you had Caleb Downs, and I think they had 1 D lineman in the rotation. Am I missing somebody? I don't know that they really had anybody else in the 2014 that was like a major impact from the portal. They had some depth guys and all that, but those guys I listed, maybe it was a small number, but they were pretty flipping important for that 2024 football team. You talk about the Notre Dame portal impact against Georgia and the portal impact, but it wasn't a high number. It was Riley Leonard. It was Bo Collins. It was Jalen Harrison. It was
RJ Oben.
Yeah, but he had like 1 play in 1 game. Rod Hurd was a good backup guy, but it wasn't like they had 15 guys. But the guys they had, Jordan Clark at nickel was an important player, but the guys they had played a big role. It just wasn't a big number. And so where you're at now is if Notre Dame doesn't continue to do well in the portal, it's going to be harder to be successful because it's not just about recruiting players, because then you're going to lose some players. And I think one of the reasons I think this team has a chance to be a legit is this why I think this team is going to win it is not just because I think they did very well just getting really good players in the portal, but they did a really good job of and I'm not even talking about like looking down the road. They got guys of multiple years because that doesn't matter to 2016. They got guys at 3 different positions, position players that have a chance to be difference makers. Will Howard was a difference maker in the playoffs. Quinshaw Junkins was a difference maker for the Buckeyes. The holding king, Igbignosin, was a difference maker in the post. He was much better in the postseason than he was in the regular season. And Caleb Downs was a difference maker. Riley Leonard was a difference maker. That's what we're looking for here. And when you look at the 2 Ohio State receivers, you just need one of them to be that guy. You look at Francis Brew, you look at Tion Gray, you look at DJ McKinney. They got difference makers. And then, of course, you short up one of the biggest arguably the biggest flaw you've had as a team the last 2 years is kicking. And you went out and got an excellent field goal kicker. And so I think that's another reason why is some of the things you and I were talking about postseason before the portal, like if they're going to win it all, they better do well here or they're going to be in trouble. They did that. And that I didn't even include like Keon Keeley, see what he does. I mean, I didn't include Jaden Sanders. I mean, there's more than just the guys I mentioned, but those are the ones where you needed to hit big, and they did.
You brought up a couple of the defensive portal players. Let's talk about the defense as a whole, man. One of the reasons why we think Notre Dame is going to win a championship this year is the defense is absolutely loaded across all 3 levels. Goes back to something I was talking about earlier. We've seen previous Notre Dame teams just, that is clearly the best linebacker in the country right there. Jalen Smith, Manti Te'o, JOK. And then the rest of the supporting cast was good, but I would hesitate to call it championship level. We've seen years before, it's like, dude, they got Kyle Hamilton. And then everybody else around it was like, good, but
it was Kyle Hamilton in 2020, but then it was like Clarence Lewis and Nick McLeod and Sean Crawford was in year 6, and it was like it was Kyle Hamilton and a bunch of undrafted free agents. I mean, that's not an insult. That's literally what happened.
Yeah, 100%. When I look at this defense on paper, it's almost like one of those things. We get a lot of mailbag questions about, what if you could put this secondary with this year's linebacking core, and what if you put this year's defensive line with, the 20 whatever secondary. That's kind of what this defense looks like. It would not shock me if in 5 years we look back and like, dude, how did Notre Dame have Leonard Moore and Tay Johnson and Adon Schuler and Drake Bowen and Boubacar Traore and Bryce Young all on the same team? Mm-hmm. That's nuts. Those are the vibes that this defense is giving off, and they're loaded at every level.
Well, it's like it's we were talking the other day, Trev, and kind of joking, like, well, not even joking, but like we seriously said if you could add anyone from the 2012 defense, like we didn't pick Manti. It wasn't that long ago that would have been nuts. And it's not that Manti wouldn't be their best linebacker; he would be. It's that you just don't have a need there. Like the need is maybe greater somewhere else, but we would definitely take a linebacker from this team and pick any of your top 4 linebackers and put them on the 2012 team next to Manti.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you just named the 3 stud linebackers from the past. How many of their linebacker mates got drafted? None of them. You know, Manti had Dan Fox. He didn't get drafted. Carlo Calabrese didn't get drafted. Joe Schmidt didn't get drafted with Jalen Smith. Drew White didn't get drafted. You could, I mean, the only guy that got drafted from the 2020 team were guys that were rotation guys. It was, you know, Maris Leofau, guys, Jack Kai, they were rotation guys. They weren't even starters.
Yeah.
And so it's a very different animal now than it was then, Trev. And when you look at this defense and you talk about the potential they have, the talent they have, it's really on all 3 levels. You have a potential star or 2, or actually, let me say not even 2 or more on every level. And you want to talk about, you know, again, let's just look at past champions. You look at the team that beat Notre Dame. You know, they had high stars. JT was a star. He wasn't a first-round draft pick, but he was a college star. You had, you know, Arvell Reese as a backup linebacker on the 24 team. That's how good they were. Cody Simon, Sonny Styles. Then in the secondary, you had Caleb Downs. You know, like you had stars on all 3 levels, and it's the same thing here with Notre Dame is you have stars on all 3 levels. You have arguably the best safety tandem in college football, arguably the best returning safety in college football. I would not say that I would not argue that Tay is the best returning safety. I think he has a chance to be the best safety in 2026. But I don't know that, I mean, there's a couple teams that could be in the conversation, but I wouldn't find your argument sympathetic that anyone has a better duo than what they have. You have, without a doubt, the best cornerback coming back in college football. You have someone that not Brian Driscoll and Trevor Trowbridge has said is the best returning college football linebacker. You have what other people have read. I've now seen at least 2 different services, whatever, say that Kingston is the best returning linebacker in college football. PFF, and then I saw some other outlet, I forget who it was the other day, Trev, had him like number 1 or 2. I've seen others that had Kingston in the top 10 and Drake in the top 10. I saw one the other day that was that way, that had both Drake and Kingston. And then, of course, you have Boubacar on the defensive line who has the chance to also become a star player. Now, that's the side of the ball where that's the part of the team where I would say I'm not as sold that you definitely have a proven star. I don't think you have a proven star. I don't know that it's a given that anyone will become a star, but you have so many really good players that may not matter. I don't think Indiana had a star defensive lineman. Matter of fact, it's not even, I think Indiana did not have a star defensive lineman last year. They just had a lot of really good linemen that turned into an elite group. And I think Notre Dame has that this year. But what makes this D-line, in my opinion, different than past D-lines, and why I think this is more of a championship caliber D-line, not that you can win a title. They could have won a title with the D-line in 25, and I think the 24 D-line might have been championship caliber when it was healthy. It wasn't. It was good enough that if other parts of the team play well, you can win it with them. But we saw in the championship game against Ohio State that was not a championship caliber D-line. You weren't going to win because of them. You're going to win with them, but not because of them. The high level talent, the depth, but there's more star power on this D-line than there was in 24, 25. 24, we're talking about the team that we saw in the championship game. Because again, no Riley Mills, no Boubacar, no Patelho, and Howard Cross wasn't 100%. But that's the thing is here. You do have some guys that can. It may be Boubacar. It may be Bryce. It may be Tion Gray. It may be Jason Onye that becomes that big time impact player that has sort of the Riley Mills breakout season. There's a lot of options, and that's even if none of them do it, but they're just all pretty good. It's pretty good.
Some of what you're getting into is that margin for error conversation, man. It's all throughout the team. I would argue that every single position, including kicker now, has a margin for error outside of quarterback. And we've talked about the importance of C.J. Carter in the 2026 season, but to your point, the star could be Boubacar. It could be Bryce Young. But it could be none of them. And they're all just really, really good together. Same thing with the interior of the defensive line. It could be Jason Onye. It could be Tion Gray. It could be Francis Brew. It could be Christopher Burgess. It could be Armel Mukum. And that's the biggest thing that I appreciate about this team And you really just sit back and admire it when you start looking at two deeps. It's just like, God, dude, this team is just there's been Notre Dame teams in the past that have been, if this guy doesn't pan out, they are in trouble. I don't have that feeling at any position group on this team.
The only thing I'll say is, well, we'll get into it in the next one. But yes. So again, let's kind of recap it here real quick, Trev. Proper motivation, right? Just the disrespect that they feel, right or wrong. We're not trying to argue for the rightness of it, but they feel it. They felt they were robbed of an opportunity, and it's motivated them. Elite roster, star power on both sides of the ball. CJ Carr being a star, having star quarterback, having elite talent on the offensive line and elite potential. Portal class that really hit all the notes. Defense being loaded on all three levels in championship caliber defense. And here's the final piece. They will win because we know Mike Denbrock's an elite offensive coordinator. The final piece of this is because three coaches will also prove to be what Marcus Freeman thinks they are. And that is Joe Rudolph, that is Mike Brown, and that is, of course, Chris Ash. Mike Brown lesser so, as far as like he could just still be what he's been and they're going to be fine. But I think he's got a very important task this year as well. Joe Rudolph is what Marcus Freeman thinks he is and is truly one of the better line coaches in the country. And Chris Ash is the guy that that Marcus Freeman thinks he is. If those three things are also true, that's going to be the final ingredient to Notre Dame being a championship football team this year.
Brian, we just got done running through the reasons why we believe Notre Dame is going to win a national championship on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. But we'd be remiss if we also didn't talk about the other side of that coin and talk about the potential stumbling blocks. And that is a reality that every team, not just Notre Dame, has to face when looking in the mirror. For Ohio State, yeah, you could just say you have Julian Sain and Jeremiah Smith, but you would be wrong if you were to dismiss the areas that you have to improve and the areas that you have to address. And so with Notre Dame, that's where we kind of start this conversation, is the biggest potential stumbling blocks to Notre Dame achieving their ultimate goal of winning a championship.
Mm-hmm. I think when I look at this football team and we start talking about how excited we are about the potential of this team, and we start talking about that, like there's no doubt, Trev, that this team has all that it takes to win a title. But I also think that maybe in some ways we as a fan base are ignoring that this team isn't perfect. And, you think of the buy so hold on Monday and some of the buy so hold questions. It's like they're going to win every game by, X number of points. And and it's like, yeah, I mean, they could, but, and we're going to pick apart everything about Darian Mensah, but then not act like CJ Carr has a lot to prove this year. So like, there's all these different factors that you also have to say is like, okay, these are potential stumbling blocks. Not that we're saying they will be or they are, but we're saying if Notre Dame doesn't win at all, it'll be at least one or a few of the factors here. And so that's kind of where I get into. And the first one is, Trevor, is looking at Notre Dame's history and looking what this schedule is without projecting massive improvements from a bunch of teams on the schedule. Just kind of looking if they're just even if they're just slightly better than they were last year, the margin for error is such that you can't afford to have the slip-ups you did last year. Or like, again, I think you can have the slip-ups you had in 2024. If they're 11-1, they're getting in, but your path may be harder now because you're like, look, you may be like what Indiana was in 2024, where you're 11-1, but the only good team you played all year was Miami, and they beat you because SMU went 7-5 and BYU went 8-4, and you didn't play anybody else that was ranked. Your second best win was Navy. There's a world in which that could be true, where your second best win, your best win is over an unranked team because you lost to Miami. So those are things you look at and say you may get in at 11-1. But now you're the 9 seed or you're the 10 seed, and you have to go somewhere that's maybe you get a bad matchup in the quarterfinals. Or worst case scenario, you have a 2-game slip up like you did last year, where you lose to the 2 best teams you played. You're not getting in, unless like you're getting in 2024, but you're not getting in 2025. And I don't think college football is going to look like 2024. I think it's going to look a lot more like last year or better. So I think that's the reality is they have not gotten over the in-season slip-ups and the fact that the schedule potentially could be not strong. If everybody is like they were last year, I don't know if your schedule's strong enough to get in if you lose to your top two teams the way you did 2 years ago. And if you go 1-1 against your top two teams, you're going to get in, but you may not have the seeding that you like.
The reality for Notre Dame is with every loss that you have, the more and more you put it into the committee's hands. And we saw last year that is a spot that you don't want to be in. The MOU doesn't mean jack to me on either side. If Notre Dame is in a 12-team playoff and they're somewhere in the top 12, then they make it. But then on the other hand, the committee doesn't have to rank them in the top 12. Mm-hmm. And with every loss that you add onto that L column, the more and more you put it into the committee's hands. I'm with you. The margin for error, given what their schedule is on paper as of today, is not great. And it's very, very small. I mean, and it's not just us saying it. FanDuel has their over-under win total at 11.5. They don't just hand that out. Like Notre Dame is the only P4 team on FanDuel right now that has an over-under win total at 11.5. I think the next closest one is 10.5, and I think that might be Miami is there. There might be one other team. So they're already painting this picture of like, hey, like Notre Dame is expected to go 11-1 at worst with this schedule, and that's a very precarious spot to be in if you're the Fighting Irish. So I'm with you. No room for error, very little room for error on this schedule. We are both two gentlemen that believe that this team could go undefeated, but one loss, I still think they get into. That is a spot that you don't want to be in.
No,
I'm with you completely.
And I don't know that Notre Dame would deserve a playoff spot if they lose to two teams this year.
Agreed.
I mean, the difference last year is the two teams that beat you were playoff teams, like no-brainer playoff teams. And we argued this the entire time that we thought the entire time Miami should be in. It's Alabama who should be out. And so like those are big factors, man. So I look at it and say, hey, listen, you have to handle your business. And if you don't, and if you're the same team you've been, super talented, but you stub your toe and lose to people you shouldn't lose to, then you're not going to get in. Yeah.
The other piece to this is a little bit more X's and O's related, and it's around defensive coordinator Chris Ash. And if he reverts back to the passive defense that we saw in the first 3 games, a lot of fans, depending on who you talk to, only want to talk about what happened in the final 8 games. And and I don't want to take away from what they did in the final 8 games. Gave up like 12.6 points per game. Like I read they allowed like 4.8 yards per snap and things like that. And so they did a great job down the stretch, but we also can't acknowledge that without dismissing the 2 best teams that they played had a lot of success on that passive defense.
Mm-hmm.
What Chris Ash decides to do with this very, very, very talented unit, because I was on record saying last year, I'm concerned about Chris Ash. But with the level of talent that you have on this defense, I can't imagine that they're just flat out bad. Texas A&M, they were just flat out bad. Miami in key situations, they were just flat out bad. And that can't happen this year.
Yep. Chris Ash and Joe Rudolph, but in this instance, Chris Ash was what we're going to focus on, will be reasons they win the title or reason that they won't win the title. Because the reality is Chris Ash has an absolute banger of a lineup that he's working with this year. He got coaches he wants. He's got coaches that he's connected with on the staff. Like there's no excuses this year. And if he look, and I'm not talking about like you got to blitz him in. This people like to take things and twist them into things that we're not saying. And I think sometimes they just don't understand the argument that we're making, or maybe we're not doing a good enough job of explaining the argument we're making. But like I never said they've got to blitz X number of times and they've got to play man coverage 95% of the time to be good. It was, you can't be passive. You can't be passive. You can't be let the game come to you. You've got to take the fight to your opponent. And when you have the better team, you have the better roster, that's how you need to be. I don't want to see a million sim pressures and trying to show you're the smartest guy on the planet. Let your players play fast. Let your players attack the football. Let your players attack the run game. And that's the whole point is if he's the coach Marcus Freeman thinks he is, then he won't be those things, and he'll play a big role in Notre Dame winning a title. But if he's not, and he's the guy that we fear he is but hope he isn't, that's going to hold this team back enough. Now, does that mean they won't make the playoffs? No. Does that mean they won't go 12-0? No. But it's going to mean you're going to get into that one matchup where those dudes are as good as your dudes and that team outcoaches you. Or it's at least close enough to where when that team outcoaches you, you get beat. You know, you get into that matchup and you're saying, hey, let's be soft against Sark and Arch Manning and Cam Williams and not Cam Williams, Cam Coleman and guys like that, right? Like, or hey, let's play off coverage and just let Dante Moore pick us apart and let Oregon run the football because we're playing read and react and we're letting that big offensive line get movement on us. Sure, let's do that. You know, that's the point. Is it may not even hurt you till the championship game or the semifinals, but at some point in time, that mindset is going to get you beat. It just will. So that's again, he's a reason why they might, if they win it all this year, we're going to be like, hey, great job, Chris Ash. Unless, of course, they win every playoff game in a shootout. And then it's like they win in spite of you. But I think in this college football season, with the talent that's around in college football, with as good as Oregon is and Texas is and Ohio State is and Indiana is and Miami is and Georgia is, I don't think you can win that way. As good as their roster is, I don't think you can win that way. You're going to need your defense to step up and be big time and play to its ability. And it can't play to its ability if the defensive coordinator is not putting them in position to maximize their skills. So that's I mean, we could honestly stop there. But the point of this isn't to point out all of these things will happen. They're all potential stumbling blocks. Some of them are to where, like this next one we'll talk about, is more of a, if that's coupled with other things, it could be a stumbling block. The thing that's unique about the Chris Ash one is, I would say, above all others, maybe there's only one or two other ones, that is one that by itself could be the ultimate stumbling block, where the other things don't happen and just by itself it's a stumbling block. A lot of these others are, if this and this happens, then that could be the case. This is one where it could potentially be enough to say they're just not that team. The next one, Trev, running back drop off is too significant, coupled with the O-line isn't as good as we hope. I think that's another one as well.
Yeah, it is. This has become a very divisive topic amongst some in the Notre Dame fan base and in the IB community. I have all the faith in the world that Aeneas Williams, Kedron Young, Nolan James, Javian Osborne, and Jonas Walton are going to be great players for Notre Dame. But I'd also be lying if I said that, yep, they're just going to be the next Jeremiah Love. Because I don't think that. I think they're going to be very good. And the recent track record at Notre Dame has shown that running backs can be very good in South Bend. Consistent 1,000-yard guys, impactful, focal points of offenses, all of those things. But there is a drop-off. I'm not ready to stake my claim that Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young are ready to be Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price 2.0. And if the offensive line isn't what we hope that it is, then you're really putting everything on the shoulders of CJ Carr. I have all the faith in the world that he's going to be one of, if not the best quarterback in college football this upcoming season. He has the tools, he's got the chops to do it, and he has all the physical ability in the world to be that. Notre Dame, though, doesn't want to be in a position to where he has to be that every single week. If the defense starts to struggle and they're playing soft and passive, if the run game doesn't get going, and if the offensive line isn't what we hope that it's going to be, that's a lot of pressure you're putting on a second-year starter. That'd be a tough task for any one of the top quarterbacks in the country. So I'm with you. This coupled with a couple of other things is significant, but we can't act like, as a fan base, as analysts, as anybody, that Notre Dame won't skip a beat. Maybe overall room production, I don't know if they'll skip a beat. I don't actually think that they will because of a lot of different factors. But we can't also lie and say, yep, it'll just be the exact same as when Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price were back there. That's just not fair.
Yeah, it's one of those things, Trev, where it's I don't. It's not that the running backs don't have to be as good as last year. That's not our argument. That's why we put this together this way, is because it's the running back drop off and the offensive line's not as good as we hope. It's got to be those two factors together, because if the running backs are just kind of solid, but the O-line is elite, then the running backs will produce and they'll run the ball and they'll be good. We've talked about this. I mean, I was watching the Michigan State game from 2017 and they put in Deion McIntosh and he's just running, just ripping off runs. I mean, just put him in against, what was the game I was watching? Was it NC State? I can't remember what game it was, but there's another game against a pretty good team they played that year and just put in Deion McIntosh. He's ripping off runs. And it didn't matter who they put in because the offensive line was just open. Oh, it was the North Carolina game.
North Carolina, yeah.
And they're just ripping off big runs. It didn't matter who they put in at running back. The holes were going to be there. That's kind of where we're talking about here is the offensive line. If the offensive line is as good as we hope it is, then it doesn't matter who they put back there. They have good talent. But if the running backs maybe they're not quite as good as we think they are, and the O-line looks like it did the last 2 years, they won't be as good. Because as we pointed out all last year, Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price at times were putting up yards in spite of the offensive line.
Oh, yeah.
More so than because of the offensive line.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, without a doubt. I'm with you completely. Those two things have to gel together. The next one is not necessarily like an end-all, be-all. I'm with that completely. But one of the potential stumbling blocks is the wide receivers don't live up to expectations. Again, like we made the joke about how, it seems like every offseason we're in a spot where it's like, man, look at this receiving room. They got this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, that we think this room could be this. And then they underperform, and then you get into the next season. It's like, hey, but here's the reasons why this year we think this is going to be the year for this wide receiving core because they got this and this and this and this. And then the season pans out the way that it is. And then here we are in the 26th offseason, and we're talking about, man, this wide receiver has this and this and this and this and this, and it could be this upcoming season. Now, I have been a major critic of the wide receiving room in the past, and even I'm not to the point where I'm like, yeah, I just don't know if they can do it again. There's a lot of reasons for optimism, but
still got
stumbling blocks.
Yeah,
still got to see it, man.
Sorry, Trev. I'm sitting here like I'm looking around like what's going on. I thought my wife was going to be gone all day today. She's been gone since like 8:30. She has a friend who's moving that she had to help pack today. So I'm sitting here, we're doing the show, and I'm like, there's somebody walking around upstairs. So I'm like, I'm gonna grab my little AR over here and go see what's going on. Put in some work. So I texted her, "Are you home?" And she's like, "Yes." So then she just came down and got some trash because apparently the trash hasn't come yet today. But I for a second I was like, "We're about to have an issue here on this podcast.
We got ourselves a situation.
We got ourselves a situation. I got to go handle. I'm gonna mute it so y'all don't hear it pop upstairs. But let me just go handle some business real quick, and then I'll finish the show while I wait on the cops to show up. But no, sorry about that. That's what I'm like, what the heck is going on right now? But anyway, the receivers is an interesting one because I feel like we've had this conversation ever since I've been doing a podcast. And that goes back to 2020. And you can go beyond. It's like, if the receivers, if this guy, if that guy, if this happens, then they're going to be really good at receiver. And it almost never happens to the degree that we think it is. I would argue last year's the closest we came outside of the Jaden Greathouse injury. Jordan Faison had a great year. Malachi Fields, when targeted, was very good last year. Will Pauling was as good as I think Will Pauling can be. He did his best. If not for Jaden Greathouse getting hurt, I think last year looks a lot different. Somebody said ever since Tobias. It goes back way before Tobias. This is the same conversation in 2022. Hey, if Deion Colsey and Lorenzo Stiles step up, 2021. Boy, if Kevin Austin can be that guy, he was at times, and he disappeared in other games. 2020, it's Javon McKinley and Ben Skoranek. And in that season, they did step up. I would argue that's the last time that we had those big what ifs. But even then, you had the Avery Davis, the 1 year he was healthy, that factored in as well. So like it more often than not, they haven't stepped up the way they need to. And I'm encouraged by the progress that they're making. I think that Mike Brown gets a bit of a bad rap for how the 24 receivers played. But I still go back and say, I think the receivers they went and got in the portal were not exactly geared towards the quarterback they had, especially with Riley missing the offseason. I've said it again. I think Chris Mitchell has a very different career at Notre Dame if he comes to Notre Dame in 25 instead of 24.
Or even in 23. I mean,
that's a great point. That's a great point with Sam Hartman. Not that Riley Leonard wasn't better or worse. It's just a very different style of play is what we're referring to. I think Malachi would have produced way more under Riley Leonard than he did under CJ, just because of the circumstances of the year. That he would have been much more geared towards dominance in 2024 than he was in 25, where they had other really good receivers and they were a different type of team. So, but you also have to say, like, if the receivers don't live up to expectations, could it keep them out of the playoffs? Maybe, maybe not. But it's going to keep them from winning a championship. You know, can they step up and play the way that they did? Now, the reason I'm optimistic about this one and why this one's further down on the list for me is because we have seen guys on this roster step up in big moments. We've seen Jordan Faison ball out in a game that happened to be the last time Indiana lost, which was in the playoffs. We saw Jordan Faison ball out in that game. We saw Jordan Faison play pretty darn well against Georgia as well. His numbers don't reflect as well as he played in that game. And I still think the fourth down conversion he had was a bad call. I did not think he was going forward. I don't think they should have thrown that flag, but whatever. It is what it is. And then, of course, we know what Jaden Greathouse did in the semifinals of the championship game. So there's two kids that we've seen in the playoffs ball out. And so that's why I'm a little bit more optimistic about this group than maybe I have in the past. But we're not saying that all these things we're talking about are things we think are going to happen. We're saying if they don't win it, these are reasons why. Another one is defensive line, that it's just good. It's not great. There are some big-time offenses in college football this year, Trev, that you like. Again, it's here's what's so unique about this, and this is a point that Chief Brody was trying to make the other day that I didn't think applied to that argument of best teams, but very much applies to what we're talking about here. Is just because the way your D-line played in 24 was good enough for you to win some football games against that schedule doesn't mean it's going to be good enough if the same thing happens in 26 when you're playing better offenses. Like if you're playing, Oregon, Texas, Indiana, Ohio State, Miami, a team like that in the postseason this year, as opposed to Georgia or Penn State, then the result may be very different. And so this year, I think you need your D-line to play at a higher level than what you needed in 2024. And so I think that's why the D-line can't play the championship level could potentially be a stumbling block. Again, is it going to keep them out of the playoffs? Probably not, because I don't think it's going to be bad. But could it keep them from winning a title? Absolutely. Yeah.
With a lot of the conversations that we're having, Brian, to a point that you made yesterday, if Notre Dame's defensive line doesn't play at championship caliber on the road against North Carolina or at home against Stanford or at home against Navy, I'm not worried about them dropping those games. I'm concerned about how deep of a run they can make, as I know you are as well. If they don't play at a championship caliber level, I'm concerned, okay, can you get pressure on Julian Sain? Can you make Dante Moore uncomfortable in the pocket? Can you stay in your rush lanes against Arch Manning? Can you do what you have to do against, like, let's say Ole Miss makes the playoffs, and can you do what you do against Trinidad Chambliss or what you need to do? Mm-hmm. That's what this conversation is geared towards, and that is a concern. Like, how does the D-line play relative to the competition that they're facing? And that's going to be a huge, huge factor to their success. And then, it's a big one, and one that you can never really – you have to have a game plan for, but it's a caveat that all teams have to worry about, Brian, but it's injuries. If the injury bug hits in the same way that it did in 2024, look, I am as confident in Notre Dame's depth as the next guy. And I think that they have even more depth on this roster than what they did in 2024 in terms of like talent and readiness. But I like having depth as like a nice to have, not an absolute, like you have to play these guys because of. And that's a major concern.
This team, every team in the country has, that I think is a legit title contender, has depth at a lot of spots where, like, if they lose a guy, they're okay. But also every team has guys where if they lose that guy, they're in trouble. Like, I don't think Ohio State can lose Jeremiah Smith for the season and be as good as they were maybe in some other seasons, because they still had – you can lose Jackson Smith and Jigba, but you still have Marvin Harrison. You still have Emeka Egbuka. I don't know that you want to put that burden on Chris Henry as a true freshman. You know what I mean? Like, Will Ohio State still be really good? Sure, but we're talking about winning a title. And I think Notre Dame is capable of doing a lot of things well. If they lose a guy, you lose a starting tackle. Yeah, it sucks, but you're throwing in Matty Augustine, who I think can be really good. Maybe at some point in time, you end up throwing in Grayson McHugh, who could be really good. You know, there's guys on the D line. You could lose 2 D tackles from your rotation and still be pretty flipping good at those positions. You know, so I mean, there's a lot of different things that factor into like good health. There are a couple players, however, that I think them going down could be the difference between Notre Dame being a championship team or not. One of them is obvious. It's CJ Carr. And it's not that, oh, well, if you lose your star quarterback, no brainer, because I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, we saw Ohio State win a title in 2014 with their 3rd string quarterback. People forget JT Barrett did not go into that season as their starting quarterback. It was Braxton Miller was supposed to be their starting quarterback. Then he had some injury issues and all that other stuff. And then JT takes over, has a pretty good year, and then, of course, he gets hurt against Michigan. And so, but again, not just because it happened once doesn't mean it's something that you're going to be. But, you know, Cardo Jones was a veteran player. They're in a very unique situation where their least technically sound guy is their oldest guy in the room, in Blake Hebert. You've got 2 true freshmen and a redshirt freshman. One of your true freshmen reclassified. He should be a senior in high school. I don't know that Notre Dame can win it all. Now, I argued a week or two ago that I think it's still possible. I think their roster's good enough to where they could maybe ground and pound teams into oblivion, and their defense holds you to, 13, 10 points, and then they only got to score 20 to win it all. That's possible, but it gets a whole lot harder, and you better hope you get the right matchups in the playoffs. It's going to be a lot harder to have that kind of team without CJ Carr.
Without a doubt, because if that happens, this team starts to look a lot like the other teams that have competed for national championships in the past. The MO of the 2012 team was to hold you to minimal points on offense and ground and pound you to death on offense. 18 was a little different because I thought that pass, I think that was more inhibited by the guy up top in the postseason than what it was the skill set of Ian Book or Chase Claypool or Miles Boykin. 2020, that was the MO. To varying degrees, 2024, that was kind of the MO, but the run game was so dynamic with Riley Leonard's ability that it wasn't just, you're running duo and mid-zone all game and you just hope the defense holds teams to 6 points. I get that. Right. But I'm with you. Through the spring, there was no quarterback that I saw that I was like, yep, that is a clear-cut heir apparent. You could argue that guy's not even on campus yet. And so, to heir apparent to CJ Carr. But I'm with you. Carr's one of those positions. I think Leonard Moore is one of those positions.
Agreed.
Where it's like, I like the talent that they have, the young talent in the boundary, but I don't know if Aiden Pouncey or Kari Adams, who missed the spring, is going to just be ready to be Leonard
or
Moore.
Jaden Sanders.
Or Jaden Sanders.
It could be Jaden Sanders. It could be Dallas Golden. It could be Mark Zachary. I mean, I agree with you because he's so good. But the reason I went CJ Carr first, and it's by a mile, is because it's easier to put a freshman on the field and be good. And the reason that it's not even about Leonard. It's like we just saw this 2 years ago when Benjamin Morrison went down in game 6 for the year, and they just put Leonard Moore in and didn't miss a beat. Like that's kind of where I'm coming from. Is there's more of a track record there.
Sure.
You could change your coverage structure to protect the boundary corner in a way that helps you still be good. That's why, our Archer in the chat made a point that he agreed with us about Jeremiah Smith. And he said, well, but no team can win it all if they lose their best player. I don't agree with that. I think part of it is, A, who's your backup? How good is your backup? And part B is, what position does your backup play? It's easier to overcome if your best player is at a certain position than if it's another position. Is Leonard Moore a better player than CJ Carr? Yeah. Is CJ Carr more important than Leonard Moore? Positional value, slightly. It's more about, but there's a big difference between who you're putting on the field if CJ Carr goes down compared to who you're putting on the field. And then also, is that position prone to having success with younger players? That's where I'm coming from. So, like, if you were to say, okay, Kingston Viliama-Asa is Notre Dame's best player, or like let's just say he is. Let's say Leonard Moore went pro, and we're saying like Kingston's your best defensive player. All right, cool. If Kingston goes down, you're still going to be fine because you've got Drake Bowen and Jaden Osbury, and you've got Jalen Sneed and Madden Faramo. And so that's the point that I'm making is you could lose that guy and still be good. Archer responded, I thought you said best player in college football. Okay, let's go that route. If you lose the best player in college football at receiver, but your guys you have left are Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr., then you can still win a title. That's my point, is it depends on who you have. In the specific case of Ohio State, I don't think this year they have that type of player like they had, in my opinion, in 2022, where you had Marvin Harrison and you had Emeka Egbuka. And you say, well, then you lose Marvin Harrison, and that caused you to lose to Georgia. Yeah, but that was the second star receiver you had lost. So, like, again, in theory, yeah, it's going to be harder, but it just depends on who is stepping in. If Kenny Minchie was still at Notre Dame, my thoughts on CJ Carr being number one on this list changes. Because I'm like, look, I think Kenny can go lead this team to a championship now that he's a senior and those type of things. So there's a lot of it just depends on what position we're talking about. And Archer, no, you didn't prove that in 2022 because you did not win because you didn't have Jackson Smith and Jigba. That's the whole point. If you didn't lose because of that, it's will that injury be the reason why you lost? Not having Jackson Smith and Jigba is not why you gave up 42 points to Georgia. You didn't win that year because your defense was garbage. Whenever you played anybody good, that's the point. It's your championship here, but you take that one guy away, and that's where you're having a problem. And to me, the gap between CJ Carr and what comes next to quarterback, if it's over a period of time, is significant.
Without a doubt. Yeah,
and I think Leonard Moore's that way. I think there's one other player. Like, I don't want to lose Anthony Knapp or Gerby Lambert. You can survive there if you got to put Matty Augustine in the game. You mentioned earlier, I don't want to lose Ashton Craig, but you can survive with Joe Otting. We saw that last year. D tackles one, linebackers one. Where I love the talent they have there. It's so deep. Safety, you can sustain one injury, you can't sustain two. That's a concern. The other area is defensive end. They need Boubacar Traore to stay healthy. I don't know that there's another player that can do what he can do this year. I don't know that I want to put that type of burden on Rodney Dunham as a true freshman to do what he can do. Maybe Keon Keeley has a breakout, but again, I don't want to kind of put that expectation on him. Maybe it's, well, Bryce Young becomes that guy. Okay, maybe. And then Keon Keeley becomes Bryce Young. Maybe. But that's a concern that I have as well. That's another position where I have a little bit of a concern, Trev.
The final piece of this conversation, Brian, and it's one that I won't lie, difficult to acknowledge because we're so high on Notre Dame, but there is a world where there's just a better team. That is also very possible. Like preseason and how things, look at last year. I had Penn State as my number one overall team in the offseason. There were definitely teams better than Penn State last year. A lot of moving parts. Point being, I can look at a team on paper and look at how they performed in spring and say, like, I think this is going to be the best team in college football for a reason. This, and this. And it's not because I have an Irish breakdown flag behind me or a Notre Dame little poster thing right here next to me. I have valid reasons for it. But there's also a world that, what if Texas is better? What if Oregon is just a better football team? What if Ohio State is just a better football team? That's also a reality of this year too.
Yeah. This year's different than past years, Trev, where we've talked about this a lot. Notre Dame has a roster in 26 that I think is significantly better than what we saw anyone have last year, including Indiana. I think their 26 roster is significantly better top to bottom than any team in 24. Now, Ohio State can match Notre Dame top player for top player, no doubt. But Ohio State, that 24 team had a lot of holes, which is why they lost 2 games in the regular season. This year, there are a lot of teams like that. There's a world in which Notre Dame is every bit as good as we think they are. Texas is just better. Or Oregon is just better. Or Ohio State is just better. Like, that's a world we might live in. That's part of it too, Trev. Sometimes you just have to be willing to say, look, dude, the coaching was good. The talent was good. The injuries didn't hurt them. They played as well as they could. That team was just better. That's a possibility as well. doesn't require a lot of harping on it, but I do think that this is a year where there is enough talent on the roster as a whole at several schools to where, hey, Georgia's as good as Kirby's had since 2022. Way better than the last 2 years' teams, but it's still not good enough for them to win a quarterfinal game because they just got matched up against – they're the number 4 seed, and they got matched up against number 5 Ohio State, who's just better. You know, like Texas, he said, boy, this Sark coached his butt off this year, man. He got everything out of that Texas team. He did a great job, but they just ran into that buzzsaw that is Notre Dame or Oregon or Ohio State or Georgia. I mean, that's again, partly why I take ourselves away from the Notre Dame fandom for a second. That's one of the reasons I'm so looking forward to this season of college football.
Oh, yeah.
There are some really talented football teams in college football to where you can say, man, Ryan Day coached his butt off. Arthur Smith and Matt Patricia were both great hires, and the O-line did this, and they just ran into an Oregon team that was better, or a Notre Dame team that was better, or a Texas team that was better. Like that's just the reality of college football this year, that there's going to be those scenarios where the fan base is not happy. They're going to blame the coach. They're going to blame this. But the reality is that other team was just better. And that's a possibility. Everything else above of this point could go right. You know, schedule was strong. Chris Ash handles his business like a champ. Running back room is great. O-line plays great. Receivers live up to expectations. D-line plays like a championship caliber team. Injuries aren't a problem. And somebody else is just better. That's the final piece of this conversation. Now, I don't know that that's going to happen because I do think this is the best roster in college football. But it's at least enough to where, like, dude, this coaching staff did a great job. They did. That team was just better. Like, you can say it's Chris Ash's fault or Joe Rudolph's fault or whoever else's fault you want, but, like, dude, that team was just better. This team is just better. And to respond to a question in the chat, yes, I think that Notre Dame has a better roster than any champion since Georgia 2022. I believe that. I believe this roster is better than anyone's, like, since Georgia 2022, better than Michigan, better than Ohio State, better than Indiana. But I don't think Notre Dame's the only team in college football in 2026 that I would also say that's about. Just pure talent-wise, I think Texas has a better roster than the last 3 champions. Just pure talent-wise, I think Oregon has a better roster than the last 3 national champions. I think in some ways Indiana has a better roster in a lot of areas than they did last year. Some areas maybe not quite as much. I think Ohio State has an argument to say, could they be better overall than they were 2 years ago? I think that's a legitimate thing to say about several teams this season.
What's fascinating about this season of college football, I'm with you. I echo the same sentiment about the amount of talented rosters. The biggest question is who can be the better team? I mean, I think the 25 Notre Dame roster was more talented than the 24 roster, but they weren't the better team. And that's the conversation that makes this so interesting, is if Notre Dame can turn that. That's why there's so much pressure on Joe Rudolph and Chris Ash this year and Marcus Freeman and Dan Lanning and Ryan Day to, try to get back into that light. So I'm with you, man. It's going to be interesting to see how that all pans out.
Yep.
Brian, it is time to start our opponent preview series here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And up first, obviously, is Notre Dame's number 1 opponent, who they get in the Shamrock Series, the Wisconsin Badgers, who they play at Lambeau Field on September 6th. Crazy to think that we're under 100 days now to that game. Thank goodness.
Dude, it is crazy. It is really crazy to think about just kind of where this team is and where the season is and where the schedule is. And it's just like there's been so much drama going on, Trev, that it's kind of made it hard to and I don't mean drama with Notre Dame. I just mean in the college football world. There's just been like one thing after another. And you get to spring ball, and we spent so much time talking about, just looking at, just thinking about, I'm trying to think through like all the different things that we've had to deal with this offseason, and it's kind of made it hard to really focus on certain things. And then you kind of get down to it, and you're like, man, like this thing has gone by pretty quickly. Like we're getting close. Players are reporting for summer school now, and it's like, wow, where'd the time go? Like where'd the time go, man? It's been a wild off season, and we're getting closer and closer and closer. And And that's why it's like, wow, it's time to start kicking off our opponent's schedule breakdown, man, because we're at that point in time where it's like, okay, if we don't start now, we're not going to be able to get through all of these teams as we get through it. And you jump off with this Wisconsin game, and it's one of those things where I am very much looking forward to seeing this game because we think this could potentially be an improved team. And it's also, more importantly, it's going to be the first time we get a chance to see Notre Dame in action and just everything about it. It's going to be at Lambeau Field, which I'm excited about. It's going to be a Sunday night game. In typical, this is why college football is stupid and having the problems that has happened. There's 2 games on Sunday. They're both kicking off at 7:30. Like that. This is the stupidity that is college football, but that's where we are. I know which game I'll be watching. It's going to be the Notre Dame game. But this Wisconsin team, Trevor, is interesting. We talked a little bit about them yesterday. This is a very intriguing team, the Badgers, and it's a big year. You look at last season, and we kind of knew it was going to be a long year for them. We kind of had a sense that last year might be long for them because of the fact that their schedule was just so brutal. First year offensive coordinator, you're running into a situation where you've got this absolute gauntlet of a schedule last season. There's a lot working against Wisconsin. We didn't love their quarterback situation. We felt about Wisconsin's offense with Billy Edwards a lot like we feel about North Carolina's offense with Billy Edwards. You know what I mean? So, I think this is a fascinating team, but like, I'm not surprised they were what they were last year. And I don't know that as a team, they were as bad as their record showed. I know early they had, lost big to Alabama. You had a terrible loss at home to Maryland. Then you lost at Iowa or at Michigan. After the back-to-back blowout losses, I'm like, they're done. They're cooked. They're going to fold. They're going to get run the rest of the year. And then the next 5 games, Trev, they gave Oregon a tough game on the road, lost by 14, but that was a close game for a while. They beat Washington at home. They lost to Indiana, but that was a 10-7 game at halftime. And then they beat Illinois at home and then lost at Minnesota in a very competitive game. It was also 10-7 at halftime. They were a much better team in the last 5 games of the season. And I'll say this, I'm not a big Luke Fickell fan, but that coaching staff deserves a lot of credit for keeping that team from just saying, screw it, we're done. We're all going to transfer. We're going to quit. We're not going to compete. They were they were 2-3. Let's not get carried away and act like they were this great program the last 5 games. But they went 2-3 and gave Oregon and Indiana as good of a game as Wisconsin could possibly have given those 2 teams. And so like they were showing improvement, but that team showed a lot of heart by not quitting after back-to-back losses to Ohio State and Iowa by a combined score of 71-0.
Goodness gracious. Yeah, that's not great. But what is something that Luke Fickell can build on going into the season is how they finished. I'm with you completely. Beating Washington at home was a huge win. Competitive against Indiana on the road, big win. Moral victory, not win on the field, obviously. And then beating Illinois at the end of the season was also huge for them. But it kind of begs the question, is like, is Luke Fickell going to be able to build on this? Because no matter which way you spin it, Wisconsin fans don't really want to be sitting on a bunch of moral victories. Fact of the matter is they're 9-15 the last 2 years, and they haven't been bowl eligible in 2 years. You can't have back-to-back seasons of not being bowl eligible at a school like Wisconsin, especially when you bring in a head coach like Luke Fickell, who had success at a school like Cincinnati. You have to be able to start generating some wins. And, this year you don't have as many excuses. You don't have the gauntlet of a schedule that you have that you had last year. You don't have Ohio State or Michigan or Oregon on your schedule this upcoming. They still have some difficult games. Obviously, they start out against Notre Dame. They're on the road against Iowa. They host USC, who earlier Bill Bender said he had as kind of like a dark horse playoff team. They're on the road against Penn State. And so there's going to be difficult matchups in there for them, but it's not like what it was last season. And it's a big year for Luke Fickell.
Yeah, it is. I mean, this is a must-win season for him, Trev. He's got to get him to a bowl game at least. And I don't even know. There's so much that goes into this state politics because it's a state school. What's their financial situation? Are they like Florida State where they can't? I don't know anything about those things. I'm not saying that those are questions. I'm saying I literally don't know, and I don't want to speak on things that I don't know. I'm simply looking at this from a football standpoint. If Luke Fickell, if the best that they can do this year is 6-6, I think you have to ask yourself serious questions about, is he the guy that can lead us? Like I think you have to have that because there's been enough things. This is year 5. This is year 4, Trev. And they have gotten progressively worse every year. And I don't know that bouncing back and going 6-6, which isn't even as good as year 1, somehow all of a sudden makes you like this really good football team that's progressing in the right way, and you got to keep that coach. Like, I don't know that that's the case. And so, but record's part of it. But beyond that, I think it's not just about record. It's about how they play.
Yeah, 100%.
That's the thing, you know.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's are you more competitive? You can't afford to have back-to-back games where you lose by a combined 71-0. You know, like that can't be what they do this upcoming season. And it has to be a year where they can't just rest their laurels on moral victories. It can't be a spot where it's like, yeah, but we played them hard. Yeah, but combined with the schedule that you guys have this upcoming season, you should be able to get wins against, Minnesota, Maryland on the road potentially, depending on what Malik Washington does. You should be able to beat Rutgers at home. You should be able to give Michigan State and UCLA a run for their money. 2 other programs that are kind of in the middle of like rebuilding their brand per se. And it's going to be absolutely huge for them. Absolutely huge. Luke Fickell to me is on the hot seat.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. 6-6 is not good enough for that administration in my eyes.
Yeah.
To be like, yeah, come on back for 2027. I think the minimum for him is 7. And it's a convincing 7.
Because if you lose, let's pull up their schedule real quick, Trev, as we have this conversation and just look over their 2026 schedule. Because, like, okay, let's say they lose to Notre Dame. To lose 5 more games, that means you've got to lose to some combination of Penn State, Michigan State, UCLA, USC, Iowa, Rutgers, Maryland, Minnesota, and Purdue. That's 5 losses to teams that Wisconsin doesn't have a history of losing to, all of them consistently.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that is one of those things I'm like, dude, there's some bad perception losses in there if you lose 5 more games after Notre Dame. Like that's what I'm saying. Like it, but at the same time, it's also, well, what if some of those teams are really good, they're improved, whatever? Okay, I get that, but that's why how you play also matters a little bit in this as well. If they're just in dog fights every week and they lost a heck of a game to USC, and you lose a heck of a game to Penn State, and you lose a heck of a game to Iowa on the road, and UCLA. But let's say all of a sudden USC is a playoff team like Bill Bender thinks they're going to be, and let's say Penn State bounces back and looks a lot more like the team from 2 years ago. Well, okay, if all of that happens, then there's a world in which 6-6 might be okay. But I don't know that I think that that's likely. And that also would mean that you lost to every good team that you play. And I don't know that that necessarily gives me a lot of great hope for the future either. You know what I mean?
Without a doubt. And the rough part for Luke Fickell is if he does struggle or lose to some of those teams, I don't know if he's going to have a job long enough to have kind of that hindsight conversation of like, oh, Michigan State did bounce back. Oh, UCLA is really excelling under Bob Chesney. They play all of those before the midway point in October, essentially. UCLA is a little bit past. But he's going to have to perform. Most likely they're going into the road game against Penn State 2-1. If he's not 2-1 going into the game against Penn State, I don't even know if he makes it into the month of October. If he drops a game to Western Illinois or Eastern Michigan,
he's in trouble. Yeah, he's in trouble. He's in trouble. Look, I mean, I think you've got to go into the bye 3-2, and a somewhat competitive 3-2. Yeah, and for anything else, it's just not only just for him to be kind of have some breathing room, but just to have confidence as a football team. Because you come out of that bye and you're on the road 2 out of the 3 weeks to quality football teams, in my opinion. And then the home game you have is against USC. That's going to make it very interesting. Very, very interesting to see how it goes. But, like, they're going to have to grow up in a hurry in that opener. Because what you don't want to have happen against Notre Dame, just looking at this from a Wisconsin standpoint, is you don't want to come out and just get absolutely just run off the field in the opener. That doesn't mean they're going to quit. I remember a year where USC lost to Alabama. Wasn't it like 55-3, 55-6, something like that, Trev? By the end of the year, nobody wanted to play that USC team, right? So we've seen teams bounce back. Oregon in Dan Lanning's first year got beat by Georgia 49-3 in the opener. By the end of the year, that was a pretty good Oregon team. So it's not the end-all, be-all. But when you're already kind of teetering, that can be the thing that can put you over the top.
Yeah. Well, without a doubt. I mean, and it's reflective in other things too. I mean, FanDuel has their over/under win total at 6.5, like we talked about yesterday, and they're just going to have to be able to improve significantly more. I do remember that USC game though. That was the game where like USC was like getting ready to run out, and they were like holding back some of their players, like they were like junkyard dogs and stuff, trying to be the intimidation factor to like an Alabama team in 2016, and then they just got curb stomped. I remember that game. That was not great for our old friends out west, unfortunately.
Yep.
For them. But as far as Wisconsin goes, man, there are reasons for optimism with them. I know their schedule sets up favorably. I'm pulling up right now where they were ranked on like Athlon Sports, like preseason rankings. They weren't obviously anywhere in their top 25. But I'm trying to pull up and find where they were ranked.
Sporting News has some 12 in the Big Ten rankings this year. You said, what did we have yesterday, Trev? That FanDuel had them at 6.5.
Yeah,
I believe. So obviously, look, where was number 12 last year? Let me look real quick because some of this stuff can be a little bit misleading. But like if you look at the Big Ten last year, and you go to their 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, the number 12 team last year was. You had a league tie. You had Penn State who went 7-6, and you had UCLA 3-9. If they are 12th, which version of that are they?
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And UCLA obviously had a very weird year where they went 3-6 in the league, and then an 0-3 in their non-conference, which you don't see a whole lot, and I don't think is going to be a problem for Wisconsin this year. You know what I mean? Like I don't think we got to worry about Wisconsin going 0-3 in their non-conference. 2-1 for sure, but not 0-3. And because they don't play Utah, UNLV in their non-conference, and then they don't, and then obviously they got beat by New Mexico, which is just a terrible start to the season. But I think that gets them in. If they finish around 12, what did you find where Athlon had them
at 12th? Yeah.
Okay, so like. That gets them into the category we're talking about here, Trev, that 6-6, 7-6, 7-5 type of season, to where if they can just finish a spot or two ahead of that, now all of a sudden maybe they're a clear 7 or 8 win team. So I think those are all aspects, that are I'm very curious about.
Yeah. And I think an ideal season for Wisconsin is they go 7-5 in the regular season with, you got to upset, because they won't be favored in probably a good amount or some of these games, with an upset over one of, Penn State on the road, USC at home, Iowa on the road, Maryland on the road, depending on how their season goes. You have to be able to hang your hat on something, get into bowl season 7-5 and win one of the bowl games. I think that would be an ideal season for them. And there's a reason for optimism with the Wisconsin Badgers. There's a reason why you and I talk about how yesterday in the schedule breakdown, we believe that these are two teams this is a team that could be one of them on Notre Dame's schedule that turns around. And I think it starts with their coordinators on offense and defense. They have good coordinators coming to Madison.
Well, continuity as well, Trev, which I think is important. Obviously you've got Mike Tressel coming back this year as the defensive coordinator. He's going into year 4. With Luke Fickell. So he's been here. So he would have been here year 2, I think is when he arrived, or actually I think he was on the original staff, but he got promoted to D coordinator, I believe, in year 2. This will be his 4th year. And then of course you got year 2 of Jeff Grimes. Year 1 of Jeff Grimes was a struggle. It was a major struggle. I think the thing that you and I have said before, Trevor, is a lot of that had to do with the quarterback play, but I don't care how bad your quarterback play is. When you score 12.8 points per game, which is what Wisconsin scored last year, that's a problem. I mean, look, this is going to sound crazy. In 12 games last year, Trev, Wisconsin scored 154 points. If you look at Notre Dame's top 3 games last year, Notre Dame scored 182 points just in their top 3 games.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, they scored 126 against Wisconsin, against Arkansas and Syracuse. Good.
Yeah. And also had 56 against Purdue. So, 49 against, I mean, let's look at Notre Dame's last 3 games against Pitt, Syracuse, and Stanford. Last 3 games of the year, they scored 156 points. That's 3 more than what Wisconsin scored all year.
I'm sorry for laughing. That's so
terrible.
Rough.
It's you laugh or cry, bro. Trust me, Wisconsin fans have been through it. Like, the reality is that this is a team that's got a long way to go offensively. But I think that a big part of that was the quarterback position. And Jeff Grimes also was having to rebuild the culture of the offense. I think that's part of it as well. And he is still kind of overcoming, in my opinion, what have been some personnel mistakes that Luke Fickell made as the head football coach of Wisconsin. I think hiring Phil Longo, we've said this before. We said it at the time. I think it was Ryan and I were doing shows at the time, but we said, like, that is the worst fit I've ever seen. And it's not only going to struggle now, but it's going to create problems for the future, because you're going to invest the next however long trying to remake your roster to fit Phil Longo's system. Then it's going to fail, and then you're going to have to fix it. Well, Jeff Grimes is having to fix it. He's having to fix a failed culture offensively and a system that's just not built to the players they can recruit to Wisconsin. And so I understand that you're looking at it and saying, hey, look, man, that was terrible. But I think that there is a pathway to significant growth in year 2 because of just how bad not only quarterback play was, but because of what they were trying to overcome. I think all those things factor in. I mean, look, Trev, we saw this in Houston. In 2024, Willie Fritz was going through a similar situation in Houston where they had to kind of remake the roster. The culture was bad. They scored 14 points a game for a team that went 4-8. A year later, Houston's at 29 points per game. They won 10 games. It can happen. Yeah. It can be done. And so I think there's a lot of things that factor into this that lead towards it, but they have to overcome a lot. But continuity is going to be super important. And when you look at kind of what they had to overcome, like, it was a rough situation. So you had to rebuild, and they did exactly that. And I think you talk about reasons for optimism. Another one, you're going to have a much more talented backfield this year. They bring back Darian Dupree, who's a good back, but then they add the Iowa running back. You add Brian Jackson. You add Nate Palmer. This is a very different backfield. And then the jump from Billy Edwards, and then he got injured, I think, in game 1 or 2? Yeah. Now, all of a sudden, you fast forward, and you're talking about Colton Joseph, one of the more dynamic quarterbacks in the Big Ten as a run-throw guy. The backfield as a whole is going to look night and day different. If you're a casual, and you watch games, but then you don't pay attention to the offseason, and then you put the team on again, and you watched Wisconsin last year, November, and then you watch this team, in my opinion, in September and October, you're going to be like, hold on a second. Who is this? This is a completely different universe than what I remember watching last year. And that's honestly, that is my biggest reason for optimism as to why I think Wisconsin can bounce back a little bit this year. Their backfield is way better than it was a year ago.
Their backfield and continuity at defensive coordinator are my 2 biggest reasons that I think that Wisconsin can bounce back. Mike Tressel's going into his 4th year, and defense wasn't an issue for them last year. In some games it was. Oddly enough, one of the worst games that they had was against Iowa, of all teams, and they allowed 37 points. But we're talking about a team that held Washington to 10 points. Oregon was held to 21 points. I mean, it was a 10-7 game against Indiana until they kicked it on in the second half. Illinois only scored 10 points. They lost to Minnesota, and Minnesota only scored 17 points. So I like the continuity that they have on defense, but I echo everything that you said about the makeup of their new look backfield. With Colton Joseph coming in at quarterback, who rushed for $172 or like $179 against Indiana last year in the season opener when he was still at Old Dominion, combined with a loaded backfield. I mean, I think that's going to play huge for them. And they're not running behind an offensive line that's completely depleted. Their right guard and right tackle comes back, but Colton Joseph gives this offense an element that it did not have last season. And that's something that they absolutely need at Wisconsin.
There's no question. Now, I have some concerns about their offensive line from an athleticism standpoint. The kid that they're putting at left tackle, PJ Wilkins, that they're very excited about, he played guard at Ole Miss last year. Now he's going out to left tackle. But here's the thing. But what are they trying to run? They're not trying to run the spread the field, fast-paced offense. I mean, they're going to spread the ball. They're going to be a little bit spread. They're going to run more 12 personnel this year. But he's always been a shotgun guy. I think he can evolve. But what they're going for is size and power. And it's gonna be a lot different looking offensive line. Trev, as Daily Comments just pointed out, this is their left to right on the offensive line, projected offensive line: 6'6", 340, 6'6", 324, 6'4", 311. That's their small guy. 6'5", 324, and then 6'9", 318. This is going to look much more like you expect a Wisconsin offense to look, just up front. And then when you combine that with a mobile quarterback, a running quarterback, not just a scrambler, but a running quarterback, and the backs they're going to have, I think Wisconsin's got an opportunity to have a huge jump this year as a running football team. Huge jump. And that's going to be an important ingredient to this team getting things turned around, because when I look at it, I still can't even fathom this. The Wisconsin Badgers, who have had running backs that have had seasons where they were closer to 3,000 yards than 2,000 yards. Think about that. Who's had how many 2,000-yard rushers over the years?
Oh, gosh. Jonathan Taylor, Melvin Gordon.
Yeah, Monty Ball, Ron Dane.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they have had they just have Arike, I forget her. I can't pronounce her last name.
Ogunbowale?
Yeah, her brother. I mean, was
Dare.
Yeah, at Wisconsin. I mean, you look at like their all-time leading. This is like looking at their all-time leading rushers. This is I've looked at this before, Trev, and it's just crazy to think about. Their number 10 best, their 10th best single season rushing season at Wisconsin. The number 10 is almost 2,000 yards better than Notre Dame's best ever. They've had 5 seasons of over 2,000 yards running backs, 3 different guys. Melvin Gordon had 2,587, so I said closer to 3,000 to 2,000. Jonathan Taylor went over 2,000 twice. Ron Dane went over 2,000 twice. Jonathan Taylor also had a year of 1977. Monty Ball had 1923 and 1830. Michael Bennett at 1681. Brent Moss at 1637. That team last year ranked 116th in college football in rushing yards per game, 116.67, 3.3 yards per rush attempt, which was 127th. And this is the kicker, Trev. The Wisconsin Badgers, the team that we grew up watching play big boy football, had 9 rushing touchdowns last season. 9. What did they try to address this offseason? Fix that. This is Wisconsin, brother. Fix that. Yeah. Massive offensive linemen, big, talented backs, big backs, power backs, and a dynamic runner quarterback. That was fix that. You fix that, I think a lot of these other things take care of themselves, because they're not good enough at quarterback or receiver. They're never going to be good enough at those positions at both to be a team that builds itself around running the football. They're just not. Like, even in the years where they had, 2011, where they had Russell Wilson? Was it 2010? What year was Russell Wilson? Was it 2010, 2011?
11 and 2. I know he was there in 11. Are you talking? That was the receiving core with like Nick Toon.
Yeah, but like they still had Monty Ball rush for 1,900 yards that year. Like, they had good receivers: Jared Abbrederis, Nick Toon, Jacob Peterson, but like they weren't carrying that football team. You know what I mean, Trev? And that's the difference. 2000 and he was only there for the 1 year, but like they had some good receivers here and there, but they weren't, hey, let's carry the offense receivers. It was always you're complementing the run game. So I think that was a biggest reason for optimism for Wisconsin this year, Trev. And I think they had a pretty good portal class on defense. That's another reason. I think bringing them all together, we'll see. I think Mike Trustle's a solid football coach. Luke Fickell's a good defensive mind, no question about it. I like what they did on defense. I think they're going to be pretty solid on defense this year. They had one of the better run defenses in the Big Ten last year statistically. And then, concerns, O-line, big, massive physical, completely rebuilt. Do they have a pure left tackle? The guy playing left tackle now has played 0 snaps at left tackle, I think, in his career. Definitely didn't play any left tackle last year at Ole Miss. Their D-line has potential. I love what they did in the portal, but, are they guys that are good enough to kind of get them over the hump? I think those are some things. And then their linebacking core took a big hit this offseason as well. But their D-line's a question mark for me, but I think they've got some potential. This is what we talk about. The concern, D-line's being completely rebuilt. The positive, I like the guys they're bringing in. Sebastian Cheeks is coming back. He's now he's considered a linebacker, but he's a defensive end. I mean, come on. I don't care what the roster says. He's a defensive end. He had a good year, like 27 pressures last year. As he's kind of transitioning into a full-time edge player, there's some potential there in the front for Wisconsin. If their portal class is as good as I think Wisconsin hopes it is, this team could look so much different in the trenches this year if they hit on those portal players on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, another guy I'm keeping my eye on in their D-line is Justice Boone, who they got from Arkansas. Notre Dame played against him last year. Interested to see what guys like, DeNigel Cooper can do. He's coming over from App State. Junior Poyser's coming over from Buffalo. They got an interior guy from West Virginia, Hammond Russell. So I'm with you. They'll need it all to come together. Concerns about their linebacking core and the overall athletic ability of their offensive line. But this is a team that I'm comfortable saying that I think is due for a turnaround. A lot of things are working in their favor. Schedule, getting back to the identity of your program, continuity at the coordinator position. It'll be interesting. Brian, do you have a prediction for this upcoming season for the Wisconsin Badgers?
Yeah, I'll say this. The range for Wisconsin is very dramatic because you just don't know how they're going to react if they don't play well out of the gate. Like if Notre Dame just works them and then they go on the road and let's just say Penn State's as good as what some of the preseason magazines think that they are and preseason rankings thinks they are. They're a legit top 20 team. Well, Wisconsin's going to go to Happy Valley and get beat probably by double digits if Penn State's that good. And then let's say Michigan State's as good as we think they may be and bounce back and they're 2-3, then okay, that team may fall apart. But I don't know that I think all those things are going to happen. I would say if Wisconsin's as good as we think they are, they may be able to win both of those games. Who knows? So there's just this huge variation, and part of it's because we don't know as much about this team. But I look at here's where I'm at, Trev. I have them losing to Notre Dame. I have them beating Western Illinois, beating Eastern Michigan, and I have them going 1-1 against Penn State and Michigan State. And then I have them going 1-2 in their 3 games out of the break: UCLA, USC, Iowa. Then coming down the stretch, I have them beating Rutgers and beating Minnesota at home, and then I have them going 1-1 against Maryland, Purdue. So I have Wisconsin going 7-5 this year. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I love it, man. Trev? Yeah, I'm one of the reasons why I love college football is I'm a sucker for the drama that the college football season brings, and so I have Wisconsin entering the final week of the regular season 6-5. And needing to win at home against Minnesota to go 7-5 and then potentially move in. We have the same. I have them losing to Notre Dame. I have them losing to Penn State on the road, Michigan State at home. And then I have them losing to USC and Iowa. But picking up some bigger wins along the way. UCLA, who's doing some good things over Bob Chesney.
Okay.
Have them beating Purdue on the road. I think it's going to be a close game with Maryland, but I have them winning that one as well. Then I think they pick up the win on Senior Day at home to get to 7-5. They go bowling this year.
I dig it. That's interesting. So hold on. You have them losing to Notre Dame, Penn State, and Michigan State, USC, and Iowa.
Yes.
If they come out of that bye, I'll say this. I'm with you on that. Like I said, you have them. You gave specifics. I said 1-2 in that stretch. You said you have them going 1-2 with specific teams. I'll say this, though. If they come out of that bye, no matter what their record is, and they go on the road and beat UCLA, that could be the thing that gives them enough confidence to maybe also win one of those next 2. I really believe that. I think that game could be, since you put a specific to it, that game could be key because Big Ten teams outside of like Ohio State, a couple of they've gone out west and really struggled. like pretty significantly. Gone out to UCLA. I mean, we saw Penn State lose at UCLA last year. And even some of the games they won, I think Ohio State's the only one that's gone out west and beat a good team convincingly. They beat Washington pretty convincingly last year. Even though Penn State beat USC in 2024, they needed overtime and a huge comeback to do it. Oregon is pretty much smacked people. Indiana's the only other one, because they beat Oregon last year. But I think that's that kind of, wow, they went out west and got a big win in the Rose Bowl. That could be the thing that maybe helps them go on a run to where maybe they win one of those next two also, Trev. And now we're talking about Wisconsin maybe winning 8+ games next year. That UCLA game could be big. Could be big.
I'll also say this. I think there will be at least one game this year that Wisconsin plays. It could be the loss to Michigan State. Heck, it could be one of the losses that I predicted to like a USC or a Penn State or something, where we could walk away saying they should have won that game. Like they had opportunities to win that game, not that just they were so outclassed that they had no way of winning it. I'll be very interested to see what Wisconsin does this year, man.
Because that's not you say, well, Trev, this team went 4-8 last year and had like several blowouts. Like, what are you talking about? Like this is a team that averaged 12 points a game last year. This is a team that the year before went 5-7 and beat Western Michigan, South Dakota, Purdue, Rutgers, and Northwestern. Like, they're going to have some wins what are you talking about, dude? Yeah, exactly. They almost beat Oregon 2 years in a row. Took Oregon down to the wire in 2024, lost by 3. This is a team that had Indiana on the ropes for a half. This is a team that had, Oregon on the ropes again this year. So, like, they have had those games. It's like, can they put together that second half to actually build on that, not just almost win? I'm with you. If they are going to bounce back this year, I think that's a great observation. I think they will win one of those games. They won one of those games. And somebody said Ohio State struggled when they went and played. I don't count that as struggling against Oregon. They lost to a top 5 team. I'm talking about teams have gone out and gotten blown out by comparable teams or lost to teams that they should beat or better than. That's more of what I'm referring to, more so than just like they lost a game. Ohio State could have lost to Oregon at home that year. They lost to Oregon at home in 2021. But yes, Ohio State did also lose that game. I thought that was a competitive game. I just thought, that was the number 1 seeded team in the playoff. Because Ohio State also went out west in December and blew Oregon out. Remember, that was in Pasadena.
Yeah.
So it was just a good game between two really good teams, in my opinion. But Trev, you want to do did you get my last comment? You want to do it?
Let's do it.
All right. You kick off. What is your score prediction? We're gonna have some fun. We're gonna do early score predictions. What's your score prediction? We want to hear from you in the chat as well. What's your score prediction right now, knowing what we know? Notre Dame, Wisconsin.
I have Notre Dame winning 38-13. I think that their defense, the strength that I believe will be Wisconsin's offense this year, plays right into the hands of what Notre Dame's defense does very well. Like, I'm very confident in saying that Notre Dame's rush defense is going to be very, very good. Now, caveat, let's see how they do against Colton Joseph, who's more of a mobile quarterback. They have some receivers that could provide somewhat of a threat. I know, like, Vinny Anthony comes back. He's a young receiver that had a big season for him last year. Was their leading wide receiver, second overall leading pass catcher on the team. But I think Notre Dame is going to come out really juiced. Mm-hmm. And I think it's not going to be something to where Marcus Freeman's going to have to let's dial this up. I think a lot of their intensity is going to lead to some execution mistakes, being a little bit too amped up. Once they settle in, I think they really start to take off. I have Notre Dame winning 38-13.
I think it's going to be more of a blowout than that. I think Notre Dame's offense is a bad matchup for Wisconsin. I do. I think that I think the pass game is going to be really dynamic. And I think last year it might have actually been a lower scoring game, like you said, because I think they had a pretty good run defense last year. It's going to be a bunch of new players being broken into that system. I think they're going to struggle athletically to hang with Notre Dame. I see something like, 45-13, 45-10, something like that is where I'm at. I'm going to go 48 to 13, and they're going to get 2 field goals because I want to see Spencer Porath right away. So I want to see him right away. So I'm going to go 48-13. That's going to be my prediction for now. We have a right to change come the Friday, the week of the game. We can always change it. But yeah, that's mine right there. Notre Dame 48, Wisconsin 13. Irish offense, Irish pass game, Irish offense, new look offensive line comes out of the gate looking really good. Which that may seem, well, yeah, I mean, Wisconsin didn't give up more than 38 points at all last year. And they gave up 38, 37, 34, 31. Those are the four highest scoring games that they gave up last year. And that would be the most points scored against them. They gave up 44, 42, 42 the year before. Their highest they gave up in 2023. Fickell's second year was 35. That was the LSU in a bowl game. And in his first year, actually, no, wait a minute. When was Fickell's first year at? We always get this wrong. When was Fickell's?
20.
Was it 22 or was it 23? What? It was 23. So if they did score 48, that would be the most points that Wisconsin has given up under Luke Fickell. So that's why I'm rolling with it. Well, Trev, we're not going to do a full mailbag today. We didn't really get a lot of questions today, and we also went pretty long in some of our segments, but we did have a couple things I want to get to. One is a super chat from Raymond Hart. He says, got my blue performance tee. That's these right here that we have in the IB store. Trev, are you rocking one today, or do you have –
No, not today. It's laundry day in the
laundry day. I get it. I get it. It means I don't have I haven't got enough for you. I have to get you a new order this month of some of these, but these are great. They're kind of like dry fit performance shirts. I love these shirts. Raymond's got a few of them. He says blue performance tee in today. Got my blue performance tee in today. Waiting on the silver one. Already got the green one. Love them, especially now that summer is here. They are great in the summer. Trevor wears them to work out a lot. So we appreciate that very much. Daily comments at fun question of the day without looking it up. Who was the last Under Armour team to win the Natty? Now, I didn't look it up, but I know the answer to that because I saw someone in the chat said it. It's Auburn in 2010. And then Adam Garcia says, what would you change about how the playoff field is chosen? It's a great question, Adam. I think the biggest how is not so much a how. I actually like the process. Look, I have no problem with the show going on each week. I think that's part of the fun of college football. Fans love it. We love it. The show is fine. Doing it multiple weeks is fun. This is sports entertainment. I mean, that's okay. It's not the how, it's the who. You should not have sitting athletic directors on these committees. You should not have people whose livelihood is in any way, shape, form, or fashion impacted by that. I also think the only thing that I would change is I think there needs to be more transparency about how the selection is done. More transparency about who's on it, who voted for who voted for what, and making sure that you've got to change the process. I mean, you can say all you want. Like maybe the AD at Virginia has every intention of just giving her honest opinion on the ranking, but at the end of the day, that honest opinion could potentially cost her institution millions. Don't put her in a situation where she has to think about that. Same thing with the guy from Arkansas, who I think absolutely would have no problem, lying and doing things because he's a proven liar. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Hunter Yurachek is just a flat out, just bald-faced liar. And so it's the who and then just the transparency. I don't love the transparency. Make your case. I actually think like letting people see the arguments it could make you some money. Like, hey, look, we're gonna we have an hour. Let's talk about this, or just maybe play certain debates or whatever. Like, have some transparency, and then the vote should be made public. That's
without a doubt. People love behind the scenes stuff. People love the Here Come the Irish documentary. People love how to see how something is made. I'm with you completely. As far as like on paper, how they decide who the playoff field is, I have no issue with. I have issues with who it is. Hunter Yurachek should not be the committee chair as a sitting athletic director at an SEC school, one that Notre Dame decimated by 1 million points by halftime, and then was also one of the lead decision makers on Notre Dame being out of the playoffs. Different conversation for a different day. But I also want there to be like levels of consistency and standards that they're held to. Throughout the entire playoff process, it was when we looked at this number and average margin of victory, and we looked at the FPI and the FEI, and Notre Dame was this, and this. And then in the final on Selection Sunday, it was we felt. or when we felt and it looked like, and it's like, well, what are we talking about here then?
Yep.
Then why go off of these metrics? Why is it a part of how you decide the field?
Correct.
If the culmination of all this is like, well, we felt like, it's like,
we're going to throw it out the window. All these metrics we're going to throw out the window because we felt like, Alabama, this or this.
Yep.
The lack of transparency allows you, and the lack of accountability allows you to basically come to whatever conclusion you want, with whatever double standard you want. It was something like somebody had, I think it was not Heather Dinich. It was, what's the lady's name at NBC? Nicole Arbach had a tweet out where she had 2 quotes from Hunter Yurchek, one saying that they were going to give Oregon was still getting credit for beating Penn State, even though Penn State wasn't currently any good. And then in the same breath, I forget who it was, they were not going to give someone else credit because they're like, well, that team's no longer ranked. It's just complete double standard. But here's the thing. If you're being honest in your arguments and your discussion, then you're not going to contradict yourself in these press conferences. Because if you're being honest and consistent with how you apply the data, then it's like, hey, you guys can say whatever you want. And you may think this team is better than that team, but here's the reality. These are the metrics we use. Everybody knows what metrics we use. And, Miami's better than Alabama in 7 of those 9 things. I mean, those are things you look at, Trevor. I mean, we've pointed this out before. Maybe Miami wins the title last year if they were ranked appropriately. Hear me out now. Does Miami have a better shot at beating Indiana when Indiana's been off for a month or after Indiana's already played 2 games?
No, off for a month.
What are you talking about, Brian? Well, if Miami was ranked appropriately, which is ahead of Bama, they go on the road and beat Oklahoma. Now they get Indiana, wherever that game would have been played, say Rose Bowl, on a wet field, a team that can match them in the trenches, and they're seasoned after a tough road game at Oklahoma, whereas Indiana's been off for a month, as opposed to playing a Bama team that they smacked who had no business being in the playoffs at all. Now you've took down the one team that was your toughest matchup, and now maybe that pathway is open for Miami to go on that run. You know what I mean? Like, so it's not even just about, Miami got in, but why was Miami 10? Why weren't they 9? Why weren't they 8? That's my whole point. It's not just about whether or not you got in. Your seeding was jacked up. You kept bumping Ole Miss up, even though you ding Florida State. You dropped them out a couple years ago because their quarterback got hurt, even though they had won 2 games with that quarterback, including the ACC championship game, and beat Florida. But yet you're going to bump Ole Miss up a spot for losing their coach and several assistant coaches. It's the lack of consistency and the lack of accountability and honesty. So, yeah, I've used to be against opening it up. I think I've made arguments recently about I'm against it because, like, you want people to be able to speak freely. But you know what? I changed my mind because I'm like, if you're being honest and you're looking at the data and you're making a good football argument, what's the problem with people hearing it?
Sure.
So that's where I'm at. I'd say, yeah, make it public. It'd be fun TV. It'd be great TV. So that's I think that'd be awesome.
Agreed.
So and you don't even have to put all of it out there, enough to where they can't back down. But then also put the data. Tell us the metrics that you use, and then give us the rankings you're looking at. Whatever strength of schedule metric you look at, publish that so we all know.
Without a doubt.
Whatever analytic stuff you guys use, publish it so we know. That's where I'm at. Let it all be known. So actually, a good point. I mean, think about this from daily comments. Alabama and Miami had a common opponent in Florida State. And Miami beat Florida State convincingly. The game was not nearly as close as the final score. Yeah, it was a 28-22 game, but that was Florida State scored multiple times late to win that game. And it was in the same place. It was in Tallahassee, where Alabama got smacked by Florida State. And that game was a month apart. That's it. Literally a month apart. So that's where I'm at. Give us the data. So Adam, you want to talk about how I would change it? Who and transparency. I love the weekly shows. I think it's fun. I want more openness for it. And I would even say maybe you start it sooner. Let's start it halfway through the year. We've played 6. We get to week 6. We kind of have a pretty good idea of who teams are. At least enough to have an initial ranking.
Yeah, that would be sweet. I would be a big fan of moving it up too. Yeah, it'd be good. From Tommy Guns, do you think the 2014 expansion could act as a self-sabotage that could blow up this new era of college football? And if so, what could that blazing ball of fury look like at its worst?
I think what it could look like at its worst is college sports no longer is really college sports, in that it's basically a pro league where you can't – your kids are made employees. You can't really hold them accountable for academic work. Kids aren't going to class, even less than they were before. I think you see a breaking off of kind of like what Pete Bavak was talking about today, which I just hated hearing even coming out of his mouth. He's like, actually, I think this is the only way to make more money, but I'm against it. Like, well, I don't think you're right. With all due respect, I'll keep the rest of my comments to myself. I just don't agree with that sentiment. But I just think college sports as we know it dies, and it becomes this super league thing and all this other kind of stuff. Because I think if everything that's in that current bill is enacted, there's no more, I don't know that there's that same need for a 2014 playoff. I think things change a little bit. That's just my 2 cents.
At its worst, I think you're going to see players sitting out of meaningful bowl games, or sitting out of meaningful regular season games. I am of the belief that if the goal will quickly shift from making the playoffs to getting a home bid and having the best record in that. I am not one of those people that believes that if the playoff expands, we're going to see more big brands play each other. I think we're going to see even more of what we see now because everybody's going to be fighting for a home bid. We're not going to see, because there's a world that you could argue you wouldn't even want to see those big time matchups because there's nothing at stake. Michigan, like they did this past season, can lose at home by 18 points to Ohio State and comfortably make the playoffs. Like there's no incentive to schedule big games. And you have to pay opponents like Wake Forest and, Wake Forest and Arizona and teams like that significantly less money than what you have to pay Ohio State to play them.
Yep.
And so I think you'll see a lot of that on top of all the things that Brian talked about. So at its worst, yeah.
Then we have one more question in here, Trev, from a Miami fan, and here it is.
From Spencer, got into a debate with a USC fan over top quarterbacks, and when Carr was brought up, he went after Carr's poor stat line versus top 50 defenses. What's your response to this type of critique against Carr?
Well, my first advice would be take it from someone who has experience. You're wasting your time debating anything with a USC fan.
Yep.
That just absolutely wasting your time. But look, I mean, we've talked about this. CJ does need to play better in some of those games, but I think when you put all 5 of the games, because it's basically it's Miami, A&M, Boise, USC, and there was one other, Pitt. Those are the top 50 defenses they played. If you're just looking at total defense, I don't know what metric that person used. Perhaps they used a different metric, but those are the ones that they look at. That I look at, just top 50 defenses. And when I break down Carr's performance, I think CJ had a rough early start against Miami, finished strong, brought them back. I think he showed himself well in that game. He also was his first career start. He ripped up Texas A&M. I mean, I don't know what game he was watching, but Notre Dame scored 34 offensive points against Texas A&M, and CJ had almost 1,000 yards or 300 yards in that game. So I think CJ played very well in that football game. With 20 of 32, had 9.2 yards per attempt, 293 yards. Boise State was the other. I thought CJ played well that game. 15 of 23 for 189 yards, 8.2 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, no picks. He also had 25 yards rushing, had a big scramble in that game. There was also a couple receiver mistakes that hurt him in that game that would have helped the stat line. I think he played well that game. Played poorly against USC. And I thought CJ did some very good things against Pitt. He had 2 terrible throws in that game. 2 terrible throws. Outside of that, CJ was very good in that game. So it's like, do you want to argue stat line or did you want to watch the film? So, and again, I don't think CJ looked questionable against Miami. CJ looked like a talented player making his first career start that had his team with the ball with a chance to win the game against the eventual national runners-up. And he said it's primarily Miami, USC, and Pitt where he looked questionable. So we're going to remove the games that he looked good to further support the argument. Again, I watched the Pitt game. CJ had 2 bad throws that game. CJ also had some very, very good throws in that game as well. So again, I think looking at the stat line is going to tell you a different story than watching film and watching the game. I appreciate daily comments saying I was at the Indy Miami game, thought Carr played well, honestly. Yeah, I mean, he had some early mistakes with the RPOs, and he had the 1 bad RPO throw, but CJ also threw some absolute dimes in that game and ran well in that game.
Yeah, Spencer, I'm willing to almost guarantee you that the stat line that he was talking about was touchdown to interception ratio. I mean, when he played against Texas A&M, he threw for like 293, 294 yards. When he played against Miami, he passed for more yards than Carson Beck did in his first career start as a redshirt freshman. So I guarantee a lot of the conversation is around touchdown to interception ratio.
But you know what I hate about that argument though? You know how many rushing touchdowns CJ had in those 3 games?
Oh yeah.
I promise you that's not talked about.
100%. I mean, I bet this guy's also willing to, die on the hill that Drew Mestemaker is better than CJ Carr. Well, let's talk about what he did against top opponents last year. The two best teams that they played were USF and Tulane when he was still at North Texas. Yeah. He had 4 touchdown passes and 6 interceptions against them.
And as a USC fan, do we really want to talk about how Jaden Maeva just put the ball on the ground against Notre Dame?
Yeah,
like we really want to go there.
Does against top defenses.
Do we want to talk about what Jaden Maeva did against Oregon? Do we want to talk about what his 2 interceptions that hurt that team against Oregon? Do we want to talk about that? I mean, I look I'm not going to rip him for that though. Not everybody plays well in every game, But yeah, he had some games he didn't look as good. We've talked about this. I mean, we've said, look, he's got to play better than he did at times in November. He's got to play better than he did against USC. You can't make that mistake that he made in the end zone against them. It didn't hurt him against USC because USC wasn't very good. It could hurt you a lot more if you're in a situation where you're playing A&M or a Miami or in the playoff game. You can't make those kind of mistakes. Same thing against Pitt. You can't blindly throw that swing screen and have it get picked off. Those are part of the learning process for CJ Carr. But I think what usually tends to happen is people like to cherry pick information and say, hey, well, I'm going to look at this game, just look at stats. And as Daily Comments, who's a Miami fan, pointed out, like, hey, I was at that game. I thought he looked pretty good. So, but yeah, I think overall, I think CJ, the only game I thought CJ played poorly for the whole game was USC.
Yeah.
He was very good against Boise. He was pretty good against Miami in a lot of instances. He was very good against Texas A&M. And he was very good against Pitt outside of 2 dumb throws.
Yep.
He threw that backside dig route to Eli Raridon without looking to see where that backside safety was, got picked off. And he threw the swing screen that Pitt just read and picked off the screen.
Yeah.
But he also ripped him up. I mean, he made that gorgeous throw to Malachi for the 50-yard gain that he made that one-handed grab. It's a great throw. He had a great back shoulder throw to Malachi for a touchdown in that game. I thought he had another great seam throw against Pitt in that game. So in a lot of ways, CJ played well in that game. He just had 2 bad throws.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think anyone that's just say, well, has stat line, that's an agenda that I don't really care a whole lot about, to be completely honest with you. But I think overall, I think he looked good in most of those games. And to your point, Trev, if we're going to talk touchdown interception ratio, let's add those 3 rushing touchdowns in those 3 games as well.
100%
to that conversation. So what do you have? 2 touchdowns against Miami, 3 touchdowns against Miami. He had a touchdown against A&M. He had 2 touchdowns against USC, and he had 3 touchdowns against Pitt. It's not too bad.
Yeah, it's not too shabby for a redshirt freshman in his first season under center against top 50 defenses. I'd take that.
I would as well.
Well, folks, that's going to do it for us here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. Brian, I believe you'll be on IB Nation Sports Beat tonight, right? Talking recruiting?
Yeah, talking a little bit of recruiting here at 5 o'clock. Yes, sir.
Be sure to tune into that show. On your way out of this show, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends, family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Brian and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. He'll be on this evening's show. But until next time, it's Brian. I'm Trevor. See you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.